Our story begins with a frantic scene as a midwife urges a mother to push, telling her the baby's head is finally visible. The child is born, but the joy is short-lived. It is a girl, and the family is disappointed to see yet another daughter. The mother-in-law snaps that this is the fifth one, calling the poor woman a useless, disappointing wretch for failing to produce a son. Trembling, the young mother calls out to her mother-in-law, desperate to appease the older woman's growing rage. She pleads, promising that next time she will surely be able to give her husband, Sanlang, the son they all desire. She begs the old woman not to be angry, her voice filled with the exhaustion of labor and the weight of her fear. The mother-in-law scoffs at the idea of a son, pointing out that she has already produced 5 money-losing daughters. She argues that another pregnancy would likely result in the same thing, despite the 10 months of care provided during the term. The old woman complains that she provided the best food and drink, only to be rewarded with another useless girl. She insults the mother, claiming she is all looks and no substance, possessing nothing but a seductive face. She accuses her of only knowing how to charm men, noting that while she is fertile, she produces nothing of value. Looking at the newborn, the grandmother decides the infant is of no use to the family whatsoever. She tells the mother to stay out of it, coldly stating that she will handle the child shortly. The mother begs her not to throw the baby away, crying out that the newborn cannot survive the biting cold outside. She knows the child will die if abandoned and offers to give up her traditional recovery period to save her. She promises to eat only 1 meal a day, insisting that she and the baby will hardly cost anything to keep. Desperate, she implores her mother-in-law to show some mercy and stay her hand just this once. A relative tries to intervene, suggesting that when the girl grows up, she might marry well and bring the family fortune. The relative suggests the old woman might even enjoy a comfortable life because of her, but the mother-in-law only scoffs at the idea. She asks rhetorically if anyone truly believes she could ever find happiness or prosperity through a mere girl. The mother-in-law snaps that if the relative thinks this money-losing girl is so wonderful, they should take her home and raise her themselves. The relative quickly backs down, muttering that they should have just minded their own business from the start. She washes her hands of the family's drama, but demands her midwife's fee before she makes her exit. She complains about working for hours only to be met with hostility, but the old woman is in no mood for pleasantries. The grandmother scoffs, asking how she has the nerve to ask for a bonus after delivering yet another useless girl. She blames the midwife for the outcome, as if the woman had personally chosen the child's gender herself. The midwife retorts that she can only deliver what was already there, and she certainly couldn't conjure a son out of thin air. And here we meet our protagonist, Sanlang, who has been trapped in this world for 3 days now, feeling completely dazed. He still can't believe this absurd reality. One moment, he was checking into a hotel for a business trip, and the next, he was here. He remembers the chaos of that night, a cheating scandal in the room next door involving a man's own brother. He had been far too curious for his own good, watching the drama unfold until everything suddenly went dark. Now, he occupies the body of a man with his same name, whose wife has just finished giving birth to their 5th consecutive daughter. Listening to the commotion from the other room, he realizes the newest member of the family has finally arrived. That makes 5 girls in total. To be honest, he feels like the heavens are playing a very cruel joke on him. He looks upward, silently asking the universe if this is all some sort of elaborate, poorly timed prank. There is no going back now, and the previous owner of this body has left behind a truly monumental mess. It seems he is the unlucky soul destined to clean up this disaster, whether he wants to or not. His mother approaches him, her voice dripping with a guilt that feels more like a heavy burden than an apology. She laments that if she hadn't been so cheap when choosing his bride, he wouldn't be stuck with such a useless woman. She wails that 5 daughters have made them the laughingstock of the village, certain that their family line has finally reached its end. She wails that when she eventually passes on, she won't be able to face the Qin ancestors, regretting that she didn't spend more money on his wedding. In her mind, she should have bought him a bride with wider hips who was actually capable of producing a son. It is clear to us now that this old woman is far from a gentle soul, and she certainly isn't one to let things go. The original owner of this body was just as problematic, a muddled man who simply followed whatever his mother said without question. He was a man completely devoid of his own opinions, a truly exhausting way to live, if we are being honest. Suddenly, his wife, Awei, begs Sanlang to save their daughter, her voice trembling with a mother's desperation. She fears that if the grandmother throws the newborn away, the poor child won't survive even a single night. In a moment of pure heartbreak, she suggests he sell her instead, just to save the baby's life. She tells him he could use the money to marry a better woman, one who could finally give him the son he supposedly needs. We see the tragedy here. A woman this selfless is a rare treasure, yet she views herself as entirely replaceable. Sanlang realizes the man he replaced was truly a piece of work, leaving behind a legacy of nothing but misery. He gently reassures Awei, telling her not to be afraid and promising that he would never dream of hurting her. He warns her that she mustn't catch a chill so soon after giving birth, urging her to lie down and rest before she falls ill. His mother stares at him in disbelief, asking if he has finally lost his mind from the sheer frustration of it all. She reminds him that his wife has produced yet another girl, the fifth money loser, to join their household. The old woman assumes he is only acting this way because he's embarrassed by the village's inevitable mockery. She promises him that she will find a way to get him a son, determined not to let their family line end with him. Sanlang counters firmly, stating that children are a gift from fate, and he will love them regardless of whether they are sons or daughters. His mother checks his forehead, confused that he doesn't have a fever, wondering if the birth of another girl has broken his spirit. She laments their terrible luck, convinced that this cursed baby girl has driven her son into a state of total madness. The old woman insists she will bury the child alive, and while this era certainly favors sons over daughters, to actually bury a living infant requires a level of cruelty that is hard for us to even imagine. Sanlang looks at the tiny baby, thinking she looks a bit like a little monkey. In his previous life, he reached 30 without ever marrying, let alone having children, and in this moment, he feels his heart beginning to melt, which, honestly, is quite understandable. He tells Wei it is too cold outside, and urges the mother and daughter to stay close for warmth, noting the baby takes after her. He promises the child will be beautiful, but his mother interrupts, demanding to know what has gotten into him today. She asks why he is making such a fuss over a mere girl, but Sanlang firmly replies that whether it is a boy or a girl, as long as the child is his own flesh and blood, he will cherish them just the same. He warns her never to speak of abandoning or burying his children again, reminding her that those who do evil deeds will eventually face a bitter retribution. A bold statement to make to one's mother, to be sure. Noting that Wei is weak after the birth, he decides to go find her something to eat, leaving the tense room behind. We soon see that even a hero is humbled by a lack of coin. This poor man doesn't have a single copper to his name. It is a disastrous start, and looking at the child's frail state, he wonders how she can possibly survive these conditions. While others might cross over into lives of luxury, he realizes his new reality is nothing short of a nightmare. Not only can he barely feed himself, but he now has an entire family relying on him for their very survival. He can't help but feel his situation is uniquely tragic, but his thoughts are interrupted by the arrival of his other children. The girls quickly promise they weren't being lazy, explaining that the heavy snow made it impossible to find wild vegetables. Trembling in the cold, they beg their father not to beat them, their voices filled with a practiced, heartbreaking fear. Guessing that their mother has had another girl, they offer to go without food if only he promises not to throw their new sister away. Arya insists she can look after the baby, and the others chime in, desperate to protect the newest member of their family. He wonders what kind of monster his predecessor must have been to ever raise a hand against such precious, innocent children. He tells them to stop worrying, giving them his solemn word that he will never, ever throw their little sister away. Noting that their mother is weak after the birth, he suggests making a hot meal and asks if they can help him in the kitchen. Arya eagerly volunteers to start the fire, claiming it will keep them warm and that she is the best at it, which is quite helpful, really. He agrees, telling Arya to help him with the fire while promising to cook enough food for everyone to have a proper share. For once, he intends for the entire family to sit down and finally eat their fill. However, looking at the rice and flour jars, they are so clean and empty that even a mouse wouldn't bother visiting them. He realizes that life here is going to be even more difficult than he first imagined. He finds a few sweet potatoes which might stop the hunger, but he knows Roawei needs more nutrition after just giving birth. Deep down, he knows that a diet of nothing but sweet potatoes simply won't be enough for her recovery. He tells the children to stay inside where it is safe, warning them not to go anywhere because the cold outside is far too dangerous. He promises to find a way to get them some real food, leaving them with a glimmer of hope. The girls whisper to each other, noting that their father hasn't beaten them in days, yet they still watch him with uncertainty. They call out to him tentatively, their voices small and filled with a lingering, heartbreaking hesitation. They beg him not to hit them again, confused and frightened when they see tears welling up in his eyes. We see the grim reality through their eyes. They wonder if there is anything to be happy about when the pantry is completely bare. They remember their eldest sister, who disappeared on a cold day, just like this one, when the food ran out. Because there was no rice left in the pot, their grandmother had sold their sister off to strangers. A cruel solution, to be sure. Fearing it is now their turn to be sent away, the girls begin to cry, their small hearts filled with dread. The older sister tells the others to stop crying, bracing herself in case her father decides she is the one who must be sold. She tells them that if it comes to that, she will be the first one sold. She only asks that the two of them learn to be more sensible and helpful from now on. We see the root of their misery. The Qin family hasn't officially split, but because the wife kept having girls, the old matriarch grew resentful and forced the third branch to live separately. She wanted their land, yet still expected free labor from them, all while refusing to give them a single penny of the inheritance. Her heart, it seems, had long ago shifted entirely toward her eldest grandson. Qin Peng, the third son, arrives at his mother's house looking for help. His mother greets him casually, asking if he's eaten and inviting him to sit down for a bite. She blames his wife, grumbling that a woman who has given birth so many times shouldn't be struggling so much. He refuses the food, stating firmly that he cannot eat while his wife and children are starving. There is no rice left in their pot, so he asks his mother to give him some grain. She snaps back that they shouldn't eat at all, claiming it's a waste of food and that skipping a few meals won't kill them. He pleads with her, insisting he can't watch them die. Even if Ruowei only has daughters, they are still Qin blood. He warns her that she wouldn't want word to get out that she is a cruel mother-in-law who starves her own family. He tells her one last time, if she doesn't let him provide for his wife and daughters, he will sever all ties. The old woman is shocked, calling him an unfilial son for speaking to his mother that way. His brother agrees. The eldest brother chimes in, saying their mother only wants what's best and reminding him that his wife has birthed 5 money losers. He claims they have brought shame to the Qin name, so skipping a few meals is hardly a tragedy. To him, anyway. Qin Peng retorts that since the eldest brother gets all the benefits, it's easy for him to talk. If only Qin Wang spent less money. The brother interrupts, offended. After all, Qin Wang is the only male heir and the family's only hope for the future. He is a scholar, after all, and the family's entire future rests on his shoulders, unlike you, who doesn't even have a son. The brother argues that when Qin Wang finally achieves fame and fortune, the whole family will benefit. Yes, even the third branch. But Qin Peng counters with a sharp question. If Qin Wang's classmates found out his tuition was paid by selling his own cousins, would he even be allowed to stay in school? The eldest brother is taken aback, demanding to know what he means by that. He asks if Qin Peng is actually threatening him. How could I? Qin Peng replies, though his tone suggests otherwise. He insists he is merely stating the facts, hardly a threat in his eyes. To be honest, he is just being practical. He points out that the eldest brother shouldn't get all the perks while standing there making such cold, sarcastic remarks. He makes his demand clear. He is here for grain, and he wants to know, right now, if his mother will give it. Finally, the matriarch relents, telling the eldest to get some grain since the third son's wife has just given birth. She tells herself she must show some heart, if only to protect the family's reputation and Qin Wang's bright future. She grumbles about it being a curse, as if she owes his whole family. But Qin Peng looks at the small portion and scoffs. He tells her it's not even enough to fill a tooth, demanding more so, he doesn't have to come back every single day. He can't believe she thinks this is enough when his entire family is on the verge of starving to death. We see that while the old woman only cares about the scholar's future, Qin Peng refuses to watch his wife and children die of hunger. He demands a larger share, warning her that otherwise, he'll be back tomorrow morning, which, naturally, is the last thing she wants. The matriarch realizes that since the spring farm work depends entirely on his labor, she can't let him lose his strength. She begrudgingly adds a bit more, muttering that this is the absolute limit and he won't get another grain. She claims this will last them for days, reminding him that he is her flesh and blood, her dear third son. She tells him she'd never let him starve, inviting him to eat at her house, while his daughters are left with the bare minimum. In her mind, they only need enough to stay alive. She tells him to be grateful, as the rest of the family needs that rice too. Mother, I can do without the extra grain if I must, he says, but you have to give me a few eggs for Ruowei's recovery. He knows that thin rice soup alone won't be enough, but the old woman is outraged that a mere girl would need eggs. She asks if he's lost his mind, reminding him that those eggs are meant to be sold for actual money. She claims even her precious grandson doesn't eat them, so his wife shouldn't even dream of it, but Qin Peng knows when to pivot. It's time for a bit of performance, he sighs, saying he knows she looks down on him for only having 5 daughters. He laments that he wasn't as lucky as his eldest brother to have a son and will likely die with no one to care for him. He reminds her that Ruowei was a scholar's daughter who only married into their humble family because of a tragedy. He claims that with their current status, finding another wife would be impossible, so he might as well give up on life since no one loves him. The matriarch snaps at him for bringing up his brother, cursing the day she gave birth to such a troublesome son. She tosses him 2 eggs, telling him his wife better be frugal, still grumbling about how precious she thinks she is after bearing only girls. Having secured the actual goods, Qin Peng doesn't mind losing a bit of face. In this weather, results are all that matter. He offers a quick thanks, playing the part of the grateful son who knew his mother still cared deep down. To be honest, if he actually had a falling out with the old woman now, his entire family would simply starve to death. She warns him to be more polite to his eldest brother in the future and to stop causing trouble. After all, the eldest is the father of their scholar, Wang. With that, Qin Peng finally prepares to head back home. The sister-in-law sneers, asking when he learned to be so sneaky, worried he might embarrass Wanger's reputation as a scholar. Another family member speaks up, suggesting her words are unfair since Qin Peng is part of this household too. She points out that his wife and children are waiting to eat, so taking a couple of buns shouldn't be treated like a crime. The matriarch grumbles that it's just 2 buns and wonders why they can't even have a peaceful meal for once. Back at the hut, we see the cold is biting, so he decides to start the fire immediately to warm everyone up with a meal. Qin Peng realizes his family is terrified he might sell them, so he decides to act as if he hasn't noticed their fear. He tells them it's better not to over-explain things, urging them to eat a little to tide them over while the main meal finishes. Ruowei admits she is starving, but her voice is heavy with guilt because she has given birth to yet another daughter. She feels she has no right to complain about anything and begs him not to be angry with her. When she offers to cook, he stops her immediately, reminding her she is still recovering and that he has already prepared everything. We see that there is very little left in the house, so he gently insists that she eat whatever is available first. He continues to urge her, placing the small amount of food before her with a persistence born of genuine worry. Over and over, he encourages her to take a bite, knowing how fragile her strength truly is right now. It's a quiet, repetitive plea, a man trying to sustain his family with the meager scraps he managed to secure. He keeps telling her to eat, even mentioning Berlin as he focuses entirely on getting her to take some nourishment. His voice remains soft but firm, repeating the simple request for her to just eat a little bit more. The tension in the room is like climbing a steep staircase, each step heavier than the last as they face their reality. Ruawe looks at his hands, wondering why he is being so attentive and why he is holding her so carefully. She is confused by his touch, wondering why he isn't furious after everything that has happened between them. Deep down, she had been blaming herself, wondering how she could ever deserve anything magnificent in such a life. He reassures her that things will improve slowly and that everyone needs these eggs to stay strong and healthy. But the fear remains. She wonders what would happen to her children if he truly decided to sell her off. Chin Peng scoffs at the idea, telling her she is his wife and there is no need for such distance or formality between them. He tells her to stop crying, noting that he's heard weeping during recovery is bad for the eyes, and her eyes are quite bright. He adds that it would be a shame if she cried herself blind, though he quickly realizes that sounded a bit more blunt than intended. What he meant was that crying during recovery is bad for the eyes, and it would be quite a problem if she developed lasting issues. Ruawe told herself that even if this rare kindness was just to get a better price when he sold her, she had to find a way to survive. She needed to see her children again, and she certainly couldn't allow herself to simply waste away or give up now. Chin Peng urged her to eat slowly, so she wouldn't choke, his voice carrying a gentleness that felt entirely foreign to their home. He assured her no one would take her food, promising to bring the rest over so she could rest properly once she finished. We see Ruawe's confusion deepen. He hadn't even mentioned a price, making her wonder if her fears of being sold were misplaced. Perhaps, she thought with a flicker of hope, he truly had no intention of selling her after all. Chin Peng then told the children to take their younger sister outside to play, insisting that he would handle the washing up himself. The children gathered around, marveling at the new baby, Xiaowu, and commenting on how incredibly cute she was. Ruawe sighed, lamenting that cuteness mattered little for a girl and blaming her own perceived uselessness for the situation. She felt that if only she could have given him a son, her daughters wouldn't have to suffer such a difficult life. In her mind, the lack of a male heir was the reason they were all mistreated and why their eldest sister had been sold away. She called the children closer, wanting to check on them, and was relieved to see they actually looked quite spirited and healthy. When she asked if they had eaten, the little one, Duo, happily chirped that she was completely full, which, for once, was true. Still skeptical, Ruawe asked Arya if the food they just ate had been brought over by their grandmother or other relatives. Arya explained that it wasn't the relatives at all. Their father had cooked it himself, and she had even helped him with the fire. This revelation left Ruawe stunned, as she knew the house was empty and couldn't fathom where he had found the ingredients. She assumed he must have borrowed it, though the idea of him seeking out food for them was a complete departure from his usual self. Ultimately, she decided it didn't matter, as long as his plan wasn't to fatten them up just to sell the whole family off. Outside, the weather remained bitterly cold, and we see the harsh reality that they lacked even the basic supplies for the new baby. For now, he could only make do by using fine plant ash for the little one, sifting it carefully so it was as soft as possible. He hoped it wouldn't irritate her skin, though the entire scene felt strangely surreal to him. It was like a dream. He had spent so long wishing for a moment of warmth and domestic peace, just like this. The tragedy was that he'd never had it before, and he feared that if he closed his eyes, it would all vanish. He noticed Ruawe watching him and asked why she wasn't sleeping, wondering aloud if there was something on his face. She offered a small smile in return, one that felt as comforting as a warm spring breeze, a rare sight indeed. We should remember that Ruawe was the daughter of a scholar, raised with a certain level of grace and education. However, years of hardship in the Qin household had worn her down, day after grueling day. The refined girl she once was had faded, replaced by a woman marked by the heavy toll of a difficult life. Chin Peng asked if she needed to use the washroom, offering to bring the basin, but she softly told him no. She pointed out that he simply had some soot on his nose and reached out to gently wipe it away for him. The intimacy of the gesture made him feel almost like an intruder, as if he were overstepping with someone else's wife. But he realized that if he intended to live a quiet, honest life in this era, he had to accept everything it brought. And that included accepting the woman before him and their newborn child as his own family. She insisted on doing it herself, while he reflected on how having a wife and children was an entirely new experience. He told himself that wealth and a career could always be built through hard work and persistence. In this life, he was certain that as long as he struggled and fought, prosperity would eventually follow. After all, a man armed with thousands of years of future wisdom wasn't about to let himself starve to death. He told the children he was heading out for a while, instructing them to look after their mother and sister while the snow stopped. But the reality was grim. Their food was gone, and Shin Peng had no magical system or cheats to help him. If he wanted to survive this freezing winter, his only choice was to rely on the original Shin Peng's skills. He decided to head into the mountains to try his luck, though he knew better than to venture too deep. Beyond a certain point lay the territory of large predators, where a hunter could easily become the hunted. Suddenly, we see him spot a young wild boar weighing over 100 pounds. Perhaps he had some luck after all. At the very least, this catch would prevent him from returning to his family empty-handed and desperate. He managed to secure the small prize, which was a relief given the circumstances. To be honest, he hadn't expected to find anything so quickly in this weather. It wasn't a massive haul, but it was certainly better than nothing. He told himself that this was a good start for his first day out. The small victory gave him a much-needed boost of confidence in his new reality. Having a catch so soon after leaving the house was a sign that he might just survive this. However, the heavy scent of blood would soon attract predators, so he knew he couldn't linger there. Meanwhile, back at the house, a harsh voice screamed, asking Ruowei what time she thought it was. The woman demanded to know why she was still in bed when there was so much work to be done. She shrieked, asking if Ruowei actually expected her son to do all the chores himself. Ruowei softly explained that Sanlang, Shin Peng, had told her to stay inside because of the bitter cold. The older woman scoffed, mocking her for acting precious after giving birth to nothing but a money loser. She reminded Ruowei that she was no longer a scholar's daughter and would have been exiled if not for them. After years of eating for free, the woman revealed she had already found a good family for the newborn girl. Apparently, a couple in their 40s who couldn't have children were looking to adopt a daughter. The woman explained that the couple was willing to offer 2 measures of rice and some cloth as a nursing fee. She ordered Ruowei to pack up the 5th daughter immediately, as she planned to deliver the child shortly. Ruowei pleaded, crying out that the baby had just been born and couldn't survive such a journey. She had heard of that family before, and deep down, she knew they were far from normal people. They had adopted several children in the past, all of whom had been tormented to death. She begged her mother-in-law not to push her own granddaughter into such a literal fire pit. The older woman snapped back, accusing her of talking nonsense and insisting they were a respectable family. In her eyes, the fact that anyone was willing to take a useless girl was a stroke of luck for the child. She told Ruowei to look at how poor they were, claiming the girl would actually enjoy a better life there. It was better than suffering here, she claimed, before harshly telling Ruowei to let go of the child. The deal was already struck, and she warned Ruowei not to be ungrateful for the arrangement. Ruowei insisted that she couldn't make this decision alone, as the child belonged to her and Sanlang. Even if she was just a daughter, she was still her own flesh and blood, but the old woman wasn't intimidated. She boasted that Sanlang always listened to her and would never turn against his own mother for a lowly woman. It was too late for regrets. She had already promised Mother Wang, and she reminded Ruowei of what happened to their eldest. Sanlang hadn't agreed to selling the first daughter either, but in the end, he couldn't stop his mother's will. The old woman grew disgusted by the sobbing, calling it bad luck and demanding they move quickly to give the child away. She tried to force her way out, telling Ruowei to get out of the way. Suddenly, we see Shin Peng return to this chaotic scene, and his mother immediately demands to know where he's been. She pointed at Ruowei, dramatically claiming that the wife he chose was trying to kill her. "My son, you're back," she cried, immediately asking if he had found a good home for their 5th daughter. She explained there was a couple living 30 miles away, over 40 years old and childless, who were looking to adopt. It was rare, she claimed, for anyone not to mind that the child was a girl, and they were even offering rice and cloth. She wanted to deliver the baby as soon as possible, but complained that Ruowei was being ungrateful and difficult. The old woman found the crying bad for luck and told Shin Peng to take the child and come with her right then. Ruowei's voice broke as she asked if she intended to sell another daughter, as if losing their eldest hadn't been enough. She even suggested her mother-in-law just sell her too, which the old woman dismissed as utter nonsense. The mother insisted she was doing this for his own good, as raising a house full of girls was just a waste of food. Shin Peng had hoped there was still some motherly love left in her, planning to change things slowly and carefully. But seeing this, he realized things had to be settled today. "Mother," he began, his voice dropping to a serious tone. He asked her to consider how much effort he had put into this family over the many years they had lived together. During the busy seasons, he was the one who farmed all the family's land entirely on his own. And when the farming was done, he went to the city to haul heavy bags and repair courtyard walls for extra coin. He had never shied away from the dirtiest or hardest work, but before he could finish, she told him to shut his mouth. He continued, stating that the money he earned should have been more than enough to support Ruowei and their children. Yet, she had gone behind his back to sell his eldest daughter just to pay for his brother's son, Xinguang, to study. Deep down, he felt like a failure. He hadn't fulfilled his duty as a husband, nor had he protected his own flesh and blood. The weight of that guilt was heavy, and in that moment, he felt his brother's family owed a debt that had to be paid. He admitted that he used to listen to her blindly, pouring all his hard work and heart into his brother's household. And because of that misplaced loyalty, he had allowed his own wife and children to suffer endless grievances. He told her he knew she favored his elder brother, but he couldn't understand why his own children meant so little to her. He asked if she truly felt no pity for him simply because Roe hadn't given birth to a son yet. The old woman snapped back, reminding him that Wanger was the only male heir in this generation of the Qin family. She demanded to know why he, as a biological uncle, couldn't simply put in a little more effort for the boy's sake. She argued that once the boy achieved fame, he wouldn't forget his uncle, unlike his house full of useless girls. They would eventually belong to other families, she claimed, asking who would care for him in old age if not Wanger. Qin Peng scoffed, noting that if he couldn't even rely on his own mother, he certainly couldn't rely on a nephew. He declared that from now on, he wouldn't worry about Wanger's affairs anymore, admitting he had been a fool in the past. But now he was awake, and he intended for his family to live their own lives behind closed doors. He vowed to raise his daughters with care, and if they wished to marry later, he would find them good homes. And if they didn't want to marry, they would stay right there with him and Ruowei until they were old. At worst, he said, they would simply recruit a son-in-law to live with them and carry on the name. The old woman exploded, calling him a bastard and a disgrace to the Qin name. She asked if he thought his wings were strong enough now to defy her by suggesting a live-in son-in-law. She insisted a stranger could never compare to Wanger, which, in her mind, was an absolute truth. She ordered him to clean up the fifth daughter immediately, dismissing his previous words as nothing but hot air. She told him to give up on those rebellious thoughts once and for all. Qin Peng warned that if anyone touched a single hair on his daughter's head, he would fight them to the bitter end. He threatened to settle every debt from over the years, making them pay back everything they owed him with interest. He reminded her that Qin Wang was set to take his exams in the spring, and a scandal would surely ruin the boy's future. He threatened to take the chaos to the school and the local magistrate, warning her that if she didn't believe him, he would personally ensure that Qin Wang never set foot in an examination hall for the rest of his life. Turning back to his wife, he gently told her to lie down, noting how cold it was outside and fearing for her and the children. He reminded her of his earlier warning, worried that if she fell ill in this freezing weather, she would be the one to suffer later. He reassured her that she could rest easy, as he had no intention of letting their situation remain so dire. He vowed he would never give away their fifth daughter, especially not to someone who would treat her like a beast. Looking at him, Ruowei felt that perhaps, just this once, she could truly place her trust in him. She hoped he could finally protect them before telling her mother it was time to head back home. Qin Peng turned back to the old woman, stating his position was clear and noting that his elder brother and sister-in-law were both present. He declared that Qin Wang's future was no longer his concern, and even if the boy became successful, he, as the third son of the Qin family, would never dream of shamelessly trying to benefit from it. Then, he remembered one more thing, the 2 crates of books that had been part of Ruowei's original dowry. He demanded that she make Qin Wang return them as quickly as possible. The old woman was shocked, asking how he could demand the books when Qin Wang was a scholar who needed them. She argued the boy relied on those books for his reputation, a reputation built on a stolen dowry, which Qin Peng found absurd. He reminded her that Ruowei was the daughter of a scholar, and when her family fell on hard times, the Qins had taken her in without a dowry, save for those ancient books. He pointed out that Qin Wang only got into the academy because of Ruowei's books, though the mother dismissed it as all staying within the family. He countered that when Qin Wang took them, he said it was a loan, and a loan, naturally, must eventually be repaid to his wife. He insisted those books were for his daughters, not for a nephew to hoard, and gave them exactly half a month to return them. If the books weren't back in 15 days, he promised a scandal. Since he had no son or title to protect, he had nothing left to lose. He reminded her that they were his children too, before telling her to leave, so she wouldn't frighten Ruowei and the girls any further. The old woman, convinced he had truly lost his mind, spat out a final threat for him to wait and see before storming off. Qin Peng then turned to his daughters, calling them over and asking why they were standing by the door like little ghosts. He told them to stop hiding and get inside quickly, noting how cold it was outside, a perfectly reasonable request given the frost. The girls whispered that they had seen how much their grandmother liked their little brother, which was why they hadn't dared to interfere. Qin Peng sighed, admitting he had been a poor father in the past and had failed to protect them as he should have. But he promised them that things would change. He wouldn't let anyone bully them again, and he would definitely bring their eldest sister back. Ruowei looked at him, her voice trembling as she asked if he was telling the truth, if he really intended to save their daughter. He repeated his vow earnestly, assuring her over and over that he was sincere about bringing their eldest home. He told her to rest and stop worrying while she recovered from childbirth, announcing that he would go and prepare a meal for them all. He then gathered the 3 children, telling them they needed to come to the kitchen to help their father with the work. Watching them go, Ruowei felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, their future finally had a chance to improve. In the kitchen, we see the children gasp as he reveals his prize, wondering aloud what on earth such a large creature could be. He proudly told them it was a wild boar he had caught on the mountain, prompting the youngest to cheer for the coming feast. However, he warned them to keep it a secret, especially from their grandmother, or they wouldn't get to eat a single bite of meat. He asked if they were ready to help him stew the meat, and the children agreed enthusiastically. Meanwhile, he glanced toward the door. That old woman was still his mother in name, and in this era, filial piety was everything. Open conflict would only bring endless trouble. He decided it was better to avoid unnecessary drama, especially since the original owner of this body had left the house completely penniless. He planned to take the remaining boar meat to a restaurant the next day, hoping to trade it for some desperately needed silver. Since the kitchen lacked even basic spices beyond oil and salt, he had to settle for soaking the meat in cold water for half an hour. He hoped the soak would remove the gamey smell, knowing this half leg of pork would be a feast for his long-starving daughters. They needed the nourishment, after all. He told them to carry the bowls carefully to avoid burns and to start eating without him. As he prepared to bring a portion to their mother, Roawei stared at the food in shock, wondering where on earth this meat had come from. He explained that he had ventured into the mountains and had the good fortune to encounter a wild boar weighing over 100 pounds. He kept the 2 hind legs for the family to eat, planning to take the rest to a restaurant in the city tomorrow to trade for grain. He admitted he had been a failure in the past, neglecting his wife and daughters, but promised that from now on, he would take care of them. He vowed they would never suffer another grievance because of him. Roawei looked up, asking if his promise to save their eldest daughter was truly real. He confirmed it was true. As soon as he saved enough money, he would find a way to bring Daya home, along with Roawei's dowry. He was determined to reclaim what was hers, insisting that they should ignore everyone else and simply focus on living their own lives behind closed doors. She told him she believed him. Though she confessed that the dowry was just a material possession she didn't truly care about anymore. For her, bringing Daya back was enough, but Qin Peng disagreed, noting that the books in that dowry were precious mementos from her late father. He insisted they had to be recovered and told her not to worry, urging her to eat while the food was still hot. A rare moment of warmth in that house. He encouraged her to finish her meal so she could finally get some much-needed rest. Returning to the children, he noticed they hadn't started, and he worriedly asked if his cooking was simply too poor to eat. The girls quickly shook their heads, explaining they were waiting for him. They couldn't possibly start their meal before their father sat at the table. They truly were his little treasures. To be honest, having daughters this thoughtful was 100 times better than raising ungrateful sons. Deeply moved, he agreed to sit down and share the meal with them. And so, the family finally ate together. As Roawei watched him, she noticed his face seemed sharper and more haggard. He was clearly the same man she knew. And yet, he felt like a completely different person. She couldn't help but notice the faint dark circles beneath his eyelashes. It was obvious he hadn't rested properly in days, and her heart softened as she looked at her husband. He reminded her that she was still recovering from childbirth, and he joked that he shouldn't provoke her, lest he do something truly beastly. Roawei told herself not to blame him. Even if they shared the bed tonight, she assumed it would just be to please him and get it over with. And yet, as she met his gaze, her heart began to race, almost like a young girl experiencing her very first spark of love. Stammering, she asked what he was talking about, claiming she only saw something on his face and wanted to help him brush it off. He smiled, noting that he remembered washing his face before bed and wondered aloud if he had simply missed a spot. He teased her, asking what kind of dirt required her to stroke his face back and forth so tenderly. To be honest, he knew exactly what she was doing. He asked if she realized that a man is quite easily stirred before sleep, wondering if she was simply finding it hard to drift off. She admitted that she had probably slept too much during the day, calling him Sanlang as she confessed her restlessness. She told him these past 2 days felt like a dream. She had given him another daughter, yet he hadn't blamed her at all. Instead, he was taking such good care of her. Qin Peng cut her off, insisting that as long as mother and daughter were safe, nothing else mattered. He confessed he used to be obsessed with having a son to carry on the family name, but realized their family had been stably poor for generations. What use was a son, he mused, when they didn't exactly have a royal throne for an heir to inherit? It was a fair point, really. He argued it was better to raise their daughters well and find them good families, rather than exhausting themselves building houses and buying brides for sons. He urged her not to overthink things, but to simply focus on bringing their next child into the world and caring for her. That would be enough, he said. But Roawei grew worried, telling her husband, Sanlang, that he mustn't speak so recklessly. The idea of inheriting a throne was not something ordinary folk like them should ever joke about, even in private. She reminded him that her own father had been exiled to the bitter cold of the northern border simply for offending the emperor during an exam. Seeing her tears, he immediately apologized, promising her that he would never speak so carelessly again. He assured her he would be cautious with his words in public, begging her not to cry, as it was bad for her eyes during her recovery. They were certain no one could hear them behind closed doors, unless, of course, someone was hiding right under their bed. Roawei noted that since their 5th little one had finally arrived, it was high time they gave her a proper name, along with her older sisters. The girls had never been given formal names, always just called girl or lass. Since they were Qin Peng's daughters, she felt they deserved to live with dignity. She suggested they take this opportunity to name all the children at once. She left it to him. After all, he was the father of the house. Qin Peng hesitated, asking her to give him a moment to think, as he couldn't quite come up with anything on such short notice. He admitted he was drawing a blank, reminding her that she was the educated one and the children's mother, so perhaps they should brainstorm together. Ruowei sighed, telling him her mind was a bit of a mess at the moment and she couldn't think of anything suitable either. However, Qin Peng then revealed that he actually had a few ideas in mind already, and he asked if she would like to hear them. Knowing he had never stepped foot in a school, she expected names of flowers or grass, but instead he suggested Shuyue, Shuyun, Shuyao, Shuji, and Shunning. He explained that he hoped their daughters would live comfortable, easy, and calm lives, and more importantly, that they would be free and unrestrained. He wanted their lives to be smooth and their hearts to be at peace, far away from any troubles or worries. He added that if she didn't like them or felt they weren't quite right, he was more than happy to keep thinking of others. Ruowei was stunned, telling him the names weren't just good, they were beautiful. But she couldn't help but wonder about one thing. She asked him how he had come up with such poetic names, considering she remembered him being unable to read or write. He confessed that he wasn't entirely illiterate. He just hadn't ever attended a formal school in a proper, traditional way. He explained that back in their village, there was a teacher he used to visit often, and he had managed to pick up a few characters there. Plus, before that kid Qin Wang left for school in the county, he spent all day showing off his learning and reciting classics at home. He joked that his ears had grown calloused from listening to it so much, so it was only natural that he'd memorized a few phrases. Then, he looked at his wife and asked if she would teach him to read properly, noting that having more knowledge was always a good thing. That way, he mused, he wouldn't have to worry about being cheated or deceived when he went out into the world. To be honest, he wasn't really afraid of being cheated anymore. In fact, he felt his life's greatest regret was something else entirely. His greatest regret, he admitted, was that Ruowei hadn't married a scholar of her own social standing instead of a man like him. Ruowei was pleasantly surprised to see that, even at his age, Qin Peng still possessed such a genuine desire to learn. Back in the modern world, as a man of science, he never would have dreamed of waking up before 7 in the morning. But here, in the bitter cold of the ancient winter, there was truly nothing else to do at night except go to bed early. To be honest, without electricity or light, one really couldn't accomplish much of anything at all. The next morning, he chided himself for his laziness, deciding to head into town to sell the remaining wild boar meat. He planned to buy proper diapers for their 5th little one, noting that while plant ash didn't cause rashes, it wasn't ideal. It simply wasn't hygienic, especially for a baby girl, so he felt it was time to invest in more practical supplies. With the other children needing care, he assured Ruowei that his priority would be bringing back plenty of food for the family. He prepared extra food that morning, telling her that if he didn't return by noon, Arya should reheat the meal for her. As a new mother, she couldn't afford to go hungry, so he called out for Arya to come and listen closely. We see him looking at his daughters, noting how beautiful they were, but reminding them that girls must always stay clean. He encouraged them to keep themselves tidy and well-presented, which the girls greeted with a chorus of excited cheers. He then shared that he and their mother had chosen formal names for them. Arya would henceforth be known as Shuyun. Sanya would be Shuyao, and Sia would be Shuji, names that sounded far more elegant than simple numbers, didn't they? The girls were delighted, repeating the name, Shuyun, over and over, as if they were tasting the words for the first time. Shuyun, Shuyun, Shuyun. The name echoed through the small house, sounding more beautiful with every single repetition. The eldest daughter beamed, saying it sounded like the clouds in the sky, and telling her father how much she loved it. She was thrilled that the villagers would no longer just call her second girl, and he confirmed her new identity as Shuyun. The other girls chimed in, chanting Shuyao and Shuji, with pure joy, absolutely enamored with their new, poetic names. The girls beamed at him, their voices filled with genuine affection as they told him just how much they loved their father. They eagerly asked if he had chosen names for their eldest and youngest sisters as well, wondering what they would be called. He smiled, telling them that their eldest sister would be Shuyue, while the little one would be known as Shunning. He explained that every one of their names now contained the word Shu because he had a very specific wish for them. Deep down, he simply wanted them to live lives that were comfortable, easy, and true to their own hearts. Our story then takes us toward Jiangnan County, a place originally called Pingyuan until a devastating famine struck decades ago. The young and strong fled, leaving only the weak behind, and at the time, no government official wanted the post. Only one man, an official named Zhang Nan, stepped forward and volunteered to serve as the local magistrate. He spent decades rebuilding the people's homes, but eventually passed away at 50, exhausted by his years of tireless service. The grateful citizens renamed the county after him, and even today, the legend of Lord Zhang lives on in these lands. Lord Zhang did his absolute best, but he couldn't change the era he lived in, and who could blame him, really? We see Qin Peng arriving at the bustling market, where the air is filled with the scent of freshly cooked wheat. The scene is lively and simple, reminding him of the rustic country fares he remembered from his own modern world. In this moment, he couldn't help but feel that life here, despite the hardships, was actually quite beautiful. As he approached a local tavern, a young waiter called out to him, addressing him as brother and guest. The waiter asked if he was looking for a meal, noting that their cheapest bowl of noodles cost 20 copper coins. Chin Peng politely declined the food, explaining that he was actually there to sell some wild game from the mountains. The waiter's tone shifted when he realized this was a supplier, mentioning that the restaurant did indeed buy fresh meat. Chin Peng assured him the meat was fresh from yesterday's hunt, suggesting that the waiter inspect the quality for himself first. He told the man that if the meat was suitable, they could keep it, otherwise, he would simply try his luck elsewhere. The waiter nodded and told him to follow along to the back of the establishment. Once they reached the kitchen area, the waiter called out to Master Chun, explaining that a man had arrived with wild game to sell. Chin Peng invited the master to inspect the goods, and with a simple nod, the older man agreed to take a look. He pointed out that the organs and blood had already been thoroughly cleaned, leaving behind nothing but high-quality meat. Master Chin remarked that since Chin Peng had traveled so far, he would take the boar and perhaps prepare a fine meal later that evening. He accepted the offer, noting that while the two hind legs were missing, the internal organs and blood were gone as well. Since those worthless parts had been removed, the master noted that their establishment, the Sihai restaurant, always aimed for fairness. He proposed a price of 25 copper coins per caddy, asking Chin Peng if that seemed like a reasonable deal. Chin Peng hesitated, reminding Master Chun that catching a wild boar in the dead of winter was no easy feat. He argued that since the meat was already cleaned and ready, the suggested price felt a bit too low for the effort involved. He spoke as a simple countryman, asking the master to reconsider and offer a slightly higher price for his hard work. Master Chin countered that while the cleaning was appreciated, the missing hind legs were, after all, the very best part of the boar. However, seeing the man struggle in the cold, the master decided to be generous, or at least as generous as a businessman gets. He raised the offer to 28 coins per caddy, stating it was his final price, which Chin Peng gratefully accepted. He thanked Master Chun, promising to bring any future catches directly back to their restaurant first. The boar weighed in at 62 caddies, bringing the total to exactly 1,736 copper coins. Master Chin told him to follow the waiter to the shopkeeper to collect his payment, and Chin Peng offered his sincere thanks. As they walked, Chin Peng reached out to the young waiter, who seemed surprised by the sudden gesture of gratitude. He thanked the young man, knowing that without that initial introduction, selling the meat might have been far more difficult. He expressed his hope that they could work together again on future business, showing a bit of worldly wisdom in his networking. The young waiter shook his head, insisting he hadn't done much, and that Chin Peng should keep his money, but the hunter wouldn't hear of it. He explained that anyone else would have chased a man in such tattered clothes away, yet the waiter had kindly introduced him to Master Chun. To be honest, with a wife who had just given birth and a family in desperate need of funds, this help meant everything to him. The young man finally accepted the gesture with a smile, introducing himself simply as Jiu Liang. A little later, as we see Chin Peng heading toward the city gates, he noticed a massive crowd and asked a bystander what the commotion was about. The man explained that the county magistrate had hired a theater troupe to perform a grand play at the Earth Temple the day after tomorrow. Chin Peng wondered if there was a celebration in the magistrate's family, but the man clarified that wasn't the case at all. It seemed the magistrate wanted to give thanks to the Earth God for the favorable weather and the protection the region had enjoyed all year. The recent heavy snowfall was seen as a lucky omen for the coming year, a sign of prosperity that everyone was eager to celebrate. As Chin Peng watched the crowd, he realized that where there are people, there is a market, a perfect opportunity for a small business. If he could seize this chance to sell something, he was certain he could finally overcome his family's current financial crisis. We returned to his home later that day, where his daughter, Yun'er, greeted him with a bright smile as he walked through the gate. His heart sank when he saw her washing clothes in the freezing winter air, and he immediately asked why she was out in the cold. He worried deeply for her, fearing that a girl so young would surely suffer from frostbite if she continued working in such conditions. Yun'er tried to reassure him that she was fine, but Chin Peng couldn't hide his frustration at seeing his daughter struggle like this. He reminded her of his instructions. She was only supposed to look after her mother and her younger sisters while he was away. The girl softly asked him to stop scolding her, but he was adamant that she shouldn't be burdened with such heavy labor. He told her again that her only job was to care for the family indoors, insisting that these chores were not for her to handle. His wife, Sanlang, gently intervened, explaining that the clothes had been brought over by the eldest sister-in-law earlier that snowy day. Apparently, since the men couldn't hunt in the snow, the relatives felt the family shouldn't sit idle and had sent over all their dirty laundry. They had brought everything over for the girls to wash, treating his children like their personal servants. He told them to eat quickly, handing over the meat buns he'd bought in the city and kept wrapped in oil paper. They were still warm, and he urged them to eat before they cooled, noticing how they looked to their mother for permission. Sanlang gently told them that since their father had bought them, they should eat, and she encouraged him to join them too. He noted that they had been living on nothing but rice porridge for days, which offered no real nutrition at all. Qin Peng insisted that Sanling eat as well instead of just watching them, claiming he had already eaten while in the city. He then told his family to stay inside the house for a while, as he had some urgent matters to handle elsewhere. We moved to another part of the compound, where the voice of the family matriarch was heard calling out for the eldest daughter-in-law. She complained that the fire in the stove was burning too brightly and told her to be frugal, as their firewood was running low. She reminded her that when her grandson, Qin Wang, returned, he would need to bathe every single day, a luxury they had to save for. The mother-in-law added that since Wang was studying hard at the county school, he naturally required fresh clothes and daily baths in winter. The eldest daughter-in-law argued that it was just a bit of firewood, and without it, they would surely freeze in this bitter cold. She believed that once their Qin Wang achieved fame and passed his exams, this small amount of firewood wouldn't matter at all. She painted a picture of a future where they would burn the finest charcoal, and her mother-in-law would finally be recognized. She claimed she would be the most honored matriarch of the family, so there was no need to worry about a few sticks of wood now. The old woman admitted that those were pleasant words, though she noted that such a future was still a long way off. For now, she reminded her that the family was tightening their belts just to keep Wang in school, making every penny count. She insisted on saving wherever possible, especially since there would be more school fees and family obligations after the new year. She told the mother to stay focused on these priorities, but the daughter-in-law countered that this firewood wasn't even valuable. She suggested that the old woman should simply have the third and fifth brothers go out and gather more whenever they needed it. She argued that they could simply head up the mountain and chop some more wood whenever they ran out. The fifth brother, Qin Wu, scoffed, noting how easy it was for her to be generous with other people's labor in such freezing weather. He asked why she didn't send her own husband up the mountain, wondering if she simply viewed him and the third brother as easy targets. The eldest sister-in-law took offense immediately, demanding to know how he could dare to speak to her in such a disrespectful tone. She claimed he was acting victimized over a little work, promising that once her son Qin Wang achieved success, he wouldn't forget his uncle. She told him he was young and strong, so a bit of work shouldn't matter, but Qin Wu decided it was time to settle the score. He pointed out that he and the third brother did all the dirty, exhausting work while Qin Wang spent years comfortably studying at school. It had been 7 or 8 years already, and the boy hadn't even passed the entry-level exams yet, making his future career seem like a fantasy. He remarked that at this rate, their parents would likely be in the grave long before the boy ever became an official. To be perfectly honest, he believed that continuing to pay for those studies was a complete waste of time and resources. We see the bitterness in his voice as he reminded them how their second sister was married off early just for a meager dowry. He noted that the fourth brother had to marry into another family, while he himself remained single, but the third brother had it worst of all. That brother had worked like an ox for this family without a single complaint, even losing his own daughters and going hungry. Despite all that sacrifice, the sister-in-law still spent her days insulting them whenever she thought the third brother's wife might hear. She snapped back, telling him he was wasting his breath defending a woman who had only managed to give birth to 5 daughters. She claimed that if the third wife had a son, she wouldn't need to rely on Qin Wang for support in her old age. Suddenly, Qin Peng appeared, admitting he had been a fool to neglect his own flesh and blood for the sake of an outsider. He told them he deserved the hardship he'd faced, but declared that things were changing, as he had already spoken to their mother. He stated firmly that Qin Wang's affairs no longer concerned him, prompting his mother to scream that he was a rebellious, unfilial son. He looked at them and told them they would never suck his blood again, and there was one more thing they needed to understand. Qin Peng demanded that every book and rare manuscript Qin Wang had taken from his wife be returned within half a month. Otherwise, he warned them quite clearly that he wouldn't mind paying a personal visit to the local academy. His mother shrieked that he had gone too far, reminding him that Qin Wang was his own nephew, and they shared the same blood. She argued that since he had no son, those books were useless to him and might as well serve a better purpose. She insisted the books were better used to support Qin Wang's reputation, scolding him for treating his eldest sister-in-law, Sun Yang, so poorly. The old woman continued to rant, accusing him of having absolutely no respect for authority or family hierarchy. Suddenly, a commotion broke out as cold water was thrown, leading her to cry out in shock at Qin Peng's sudden outburst. She wailed about the cost of medicine if the eldest brother fell ill, but Qin Peng noted that she never showed him half that much concern. He told her he had grown used to her indifference over the years, but if she cared so much for her eldest son, he cared for his daughters. He asked why his daughters were forced to wash clothes in the freezing winter while the others acted like pampered royalty. His father chimed in, dismissing the issue as just a few clothes and noting that his daughters had always done such chores before. The old man told him that even if he was unwilling, there was no need for such a temper against his own elder brother and sister-in-law. Qin Peng sighed, knowing his father's heart had always been biased and that reasoning with him was a lost cause. And so, he decided to make his position perfectly clear regarding any future family matters. He declared that if anyone dared to mistreat his daughters again, he would ensure they paid for it twofold. He warned the couple not to try any schemes behind his back, as he would hold Qin Wang personally responsible for their actions. If the boy's studies were ruined because of them, he wondered if his parents would still be so incredibly biased. The fifth brother, Qin Wu, couldn't help but cheer at his brother's newfound strength and authority. His father quickly silenced the younger brother, turning back to Qin Peng to try a different, softer approach. The old man admitted that Qin Peng had suffered, but reminded him that Qin Wang was the only male heir in the entire family. The old man argued that Qin Wang was the family's only hope, and that producing a scholar was no easy feat, especially with the exams approaching. He pleaded with Qin Peng not to cause trouble now, claiming it would be a betrayal of the entire Qin family ancestry. We see that while the old woman usually did the shouting, it was the shrewd old father who truly pulled the strings in this house. He only stepped in to play peacemaker now that things were spiraling, but Qin Peng was determined to speak his mind clearly. In that moment, he decided he wouldn't be giving anyone face today, not even his own father. He told the old man that since he acknowledged the years of mistreatment, he should be looking for ways to make amends. He refused to continue suffering as he had before, caring little whether he met the expectations of ancestors he had never met. His priority was his wife and daughters, and he made it clear he wouldn't repeat himself. He had one final demand. He wanted Ruowei's dowry books back, and he vowed that if anyone bullied his family again, he would never let it slide. Since they had cast them out years ago for only having daughters, he declared that after the new year, they would formally divide the land. He reminded them that he had worked like an ox for years to build the family's current wealth and property. Therefore, he demanded at least half of the family's money and goods, aiming high to ensure he secured a fair middle ground. Deep down, he knew that if he didn't make a bold opening move, they would never even agree to the separation, let alone the assets. His eldest sister-in-law gasped, accusing him of being far too greedy for his own good. She pointed out that with 4 brothers in the house, demanding half for himself was utterly preposterous. She asked if he wasn't afraid of choking on such a large share, while the old man watched the scene unfold in silence. Qin Peng countered that if his eldest brother and his wife hadn't choked after years of leeching off the family, he would be just fine. He reminded them how his sister-in-law had practically celebrated when the 4th brother was forced to marry into another family to settle debts. For years, he and Qin Wu had done all the work while the eldest brother and his wife complained of phantom aches and pains. They had lived like royalty while others toiled, and though she tried to claim her status as the eldest sister-in-law, he was no longer listening. The eldest sister-in-law shrieked that having the family's only grandson made her their greatest contributor, a status she felt entitled her to everything. She wailed about how she had ruined her health just to provide a male heir, claiming she could never bear children again because of it. Now that she felt she was no longer useful to them, she accused the entire family of ganging up to bully her. As she lamented her bitter fate, Qin Peng watched her with a dry, unimpressed expression. She really was putting on quite a performance. He told her she belonged in a theater troupe with acting skills like that, and suggested she pack up her little divine show immediately. He wasn't buying it. He pointed out that she gave birth to her own son for her own bloodline, not as a favor to him. He warned her to stop blaming others for her choices and to shut her mouth before he said something even more unpleasant. Seeing the tension, the old man told the eldest brother to go inside and change his clothes before he caught a chill. After all, getting sick would only cost the family more money, a practical concern, if a bit cold-hearted. The old woman whispered to her husband, worried that if Qin Peng actually quit, there would be no one left to handle the heavy field work. She reasoned that since their 3rd son was usually so obedient, he was likely just venting frustration over his wife having another daughter. The old man advised her to stop being so biased and to show a little more care toward Ruowei while she was recovering from childbirth. He wanted Qin Peng to feel valued, though the old woman grumbled that Ruowei was lucky she hadn't been kicked out for failing to produce a son. She scoffed at the idea of serving her daughter-in-law, but the old man snapped at her to stop talking and just do as she was told. He knew that if they didn't coax Qin Peng back into his good graces, the man might truly abandon his responsibilities for good. The old woman wondered aloud why everyone was angry with her, complaining that her old bones weren't meant for the fields. Meanwhile, we see the younger family members noticing that their 3rd brother had finally changed. He had finally learned how to fight back. Inside their own small space, the children were delighted. It was the first time in their lives they had ever tasted a meat bun. The little girl dreamed of a life where they could eat like this every day, though she knew deep down how poor they really were. Ruowei reminded her daughter that her father had worked hard for these buns and hadn't even eaten one himself, so she should savor every bite. The children whispered that they wouldn't even dare to dream of such a wonderful thing. Who could have imagined a treat like this? Qin Peng smiled, telling them it was just a meat bun and promising that, before long, he would make sure they ate like this every day. The little ones cheered in delight, already imagining a future filled with the taste of meat buns every single morning. Ruowei looked at him, asking what he had been doing out in such freezing weather, and he simply replied that he'd gone to buy the buns. When she pressed him further, he shrugged it off, explaining he had merely been returning the rest of the family's dirty laundry to them. He looked at Ruowei, acknowledging that after all these years, he knew he had failed her and caused deep wounds that words alone couldn't heal. He promised that from now on, he would never let her or the children suffer again, but added that she also needed to stand tall herself. We see him setting a new standard. They wouldn't depend on the family anymore, even if the eldest brother, Qin Wang, became a great success. He insisted that his brother's fate had nothing to do with them, so there was no need to be afraid or bow down to anyone ever again. He told her he would handle everything, words she had waited years to hear after being exhausted by the family's constant disdain. Yet, she worried if this was just a passing whim, reminding him that Qin Wang was still considered the pride of the Qin family. She wasn't afraid for herself, but she feared that breaking away might break their parents' hearts, a concern he told her to set aside. He revealed that he had already made his intentions clear. Once the spring arrived, they would divide the household and live their own lives. Ruawei gasped, noting that in their village, children who forced a family split while their parents were alive were often judged harshly. She told him he didn't need to go that far for their sake, fearing he would be cursed by others in the name of family harmony. But Qin Peng countered that harmony has prerequisites. A father must be kind for a mother to be respected, and a mother respected for children to be at peace. Only when the children are at peace can a family truly prosper. A bit of wisdom that seemed to change the very air in the room. He explained that everything has a cause and effect. A father must act like one for a son to show true filial piety. Blindly accepting a parent's every whim, right or wrong, was merely foolishness, and he warned her not to let her education make her pedantic. Hearing such profound thoughts, one had to wonder if this was truly the same simple, honest Qin Peng they had always known. Ruawei wondered if he had been possessed, yet she told herself that this version of him was her ideal husband. Even if he wasn't the same man, she was willing to live with this mistake forever, calling out to her Sanling. We see her surprise as she asked how he bought so much. Could half a wild boar really be worth that much? He explained that wild boar meat fetched 28 won per catty, and their half weighed over 60 catties. It had sold for nearly 2 taels of silver. He then offered her eggs, insisting she needed them to recover after childbirth. He showed her white cloth for Xiaowu's diapers and patterned fabric for her to wear once her recovery month ended. There was fabric for the girls and new shoes for them as well, a rare luxury for this family, to be honest. They would make the clothes once she was well, just in time for the upcoming New Year celebrations. He warned the children that since they'd just had meat buns, they could only have one pastry, lest their stomachs ache. He left the rest with their mother, telling them to ask her later, before suddenly laughing at his own forgetfulness. He had nearly forgotten that today was Xiaowu's Shisen ceremony, even if their current circumstances were humble. But he insisted on the ritual. Ruawei noted that usually, one would invite a lucky matron for such an event. Or perhaps her own family would host, but as we know, her parents were still far away in the northern border. He decided they didn't need a matron and would wash the baby themselves, heading off to prepare the necessary items. The water was warm now, ensuring little Xiaowu wouldn't catch a chill as the ritual began. He gently started the ritual washing, murmuring softly to the baby while Ruawei watched with a smile. It was a simple, tender moment as he continued the blessing, inviting the little one into their world. He kept up the rhythmic washing, a father's hands performing a task he had likely never done before. Everything was proceeding perfectly, the quiet splashing of water filling the small, warm room. And so, he finished the ritual bath, doting on his youngest child with a gentleness that surprised even himself. He spoke softly to the baby, reassuring the little one that he wouldn't let him get cold as he prepared the water. We see him gently lifting little Xiaowu, announcing to the room that it was finally time to begin the Shisen ceremony. He carefully instructed the others to place the prepared copper coins and colorful threads into the basin for the ritual. He murmured a rhythmic greeting to Xiaowu, asking if the boy was doing well, as if expecting a tiny reply. He repeated the gentle inquiry, his voice filled with a warmth that seemed to anchor the entire family in that moment. As he began the first wash, he prayed for intelligence, and with the second, he wished for a long life of blessings. With the third wash, he called for all illnesses to vanish, chanting for disasters to roll away and leave them be. He continued the blessing, wishing for health and rolling the ritual items over the baby's forehead for a bright future. He moved to the baby's palms for skillfulness and then to the soles of his feet, symbolizing a steady rise in life. Noticing Ruawei's gaze, he wondered aloud if he was doing it wrong. It was, after all, his very first time doing this. He admitted his lack of experience and asked her not to laugh, but she softly assured her Sanlang that she wasn't. She told him, quite sincerely, that she simply found the sight of him working so seriously to be exceptionally handsome. He realized the original owner of this body wasn't bad-looking, bearing a striking resemblance to his former self from the future. Though the face showed the wear of a hard life, hearing his wife's praise felt remarkably good, to be honest. He shook off the thought and urged her to wrap the baby quickly, as the winter air was still quite cold. While he worried about the chill, the children suddenly noticed the ritual eggs and began clamoring to eat them. He explained that these specific eggs had been used to draw out the baby's toxins and were strictly not for eating. Little Sia, however, wasn't easily convinced, insisting with a pout that eggs were delicious and she wanted one now. He showed her the egg to prove he wasn't lying about its state, promising her that if she truly wanted one, He would boil a fresh one for her when they sat down for their meal, a promise she happily accepted. He smiled at the children, agreeing that if they wanted eggs, they would all sit down to eat together. Suddenly, his mother's voice cut through the air, accusing Sanlang of growing bold enough to defy her. She grumbled that even a useless girl was eating eggs now, demanding to know if he was hiding money. She claimed she thought he was honest, but now suspected him of playing tricks behind her back. He looked at her calmly, asking if she had come just to interrogate him about his meager earnings. He pointed out the absurdity, asking if she truly thought these eggs were saved from the two she gave before. She quickly changed her tune, claiming she only spoke out of concern to keep him from wasting money. She pleaded with him not to hide a private stash, reminding him that she was, after all, his own mother. She insisted that he hand over all his earnings for safekeeping, promising to save every penny for him. She argued that girls didn't deserve eggs, promising to treat him better once he finally had a son. He told her to keep the 2 eggs she offered, then asked plainly why she had actually come today. He suggested that if she only came to mock them, she could leave, which left her momentarily stunned. She feigned hurt, claiming she cared for them, and acknowledged the new baby as part of the Qin bloodline. As a mother-in-law, she claimed she wouldn't hold a grudge, especially since they were low on food. She proposed they all eat together from now on, promising not to mistreat Ruowei or the children. She said this was to prevent anyone from calling her biased, though her sudden kindness seemed quite suspicious. He suspected this was just a front after their recent fight, especially since he had to leave for business soon. He told Ruowei not to worry, explaining that his recent outburst at the main house would keep them quiet. He felt that after all his hard work for the family, they owed it to him to look after his wife and daughters. Ruowei looked at him with concern, wondering why he was entrusting them to his mother and where he was going. He looked at Ruowei and admitted that he currently had very little money to provide the stable life his family deserved. He explained that he needed to find a way to earn more, though he had originally planned to wait until her recovery was complete. However, since she needed proper nourishment during her recovery right now, he felt the urgency to start earning immediately. His primary focus, as he told her, was simply to ensure that she and the children finally had a peaceful and secure home. He knew that during this month of rest, it was vital for her to have the best nutrition possible to regain her strength. Since his parents would never agree to pay for such things, he shared some news from the city. The magistrate had hired a theater troupe. They would be performing at the Earth Temple, drawing a massive crowd, a perfect opportunity, he thought, to start a small business. It would only be for a few days, and he was terrified of missing such a rare chance to change their fortunes. He knew the old lady wouldn't exactly be heartbroken over their struggles, likely providing only the bare minimum for them to survive. But he had already bought rice, flour, and eggs, telling Ruowei that if his mother's food was inedible, she should cook for herself. He promised to bring back a feast upon his return, though we see this was actually Sanlang's very first attempt at business. Ruowei then offered him a small token of her own, suggesting he sell it to raise the initial capital he needed. Deeply moved by her support, Sanlang looked at her and simply said, "Ruowei, thank you." He placed the hair ornament on her, noting that with it, she truly had the elegant air of a lady from a wealthy family. She laughed softly, reminding him that the piece was meant for his business, not for her to wear on her head. But he refused, knowing it was the only memento left by her mother, something she usually deemed too precious to even wear. Besides, in his mind, only a man with no real ability would ever resort to using his wife's dowry to get ahead. He insisted that if he had to sell her mother's silver hairpin just to start a business, he would rather not do it at all. He told her to trust him, promising that once he found success, he would buy her every kind of jewelry she could imagine. She replied that while otherwise might envy her, he still needed a way to fund his venture, and every business needs a start. He explained that the money from selling the wild pheasant hadn't run out yet, providing enough capital to head into the city tomorrow. His plan was simple: buy the necessary supplies to finally set up his own market stall. As he handled the raw pork offal, the smell was admittedly overwhelming, but he reminded himself that heaven had given him a second chance. If he wanted to live with dignity this time, he knew there would always be a price to pay. Later, little Shuyun asked if he really intended to start a business, and Sanlang confirmed it with a gentle nod. He promised that once he earned enough, he would buy Shuyun the most beautiful clothes imaginable. But the girl simply replied that she didn't need fancy clothes. She only wanted their family to stay safe and sound. He reassured her they would be fine, noting that while he was away in the city, the household would rely entirely on her. He asked her to look after her mother and younger sisters, and Shuyun told him not to worry for a second. She promised to take care of everyone, showing a maturity far beyond her years. She vowed that she would never let their aunt or grandmother bully them again, a bold promise, to be sure. With Shuyun protecting the family, Sanlang felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he prepared to leave. And so, the next morning, he set out to make his vision a reality. At the market, he asked a craftsman the price of a water pot, only to find it cost 2 taels of silver, a bit steep, perhaps. Deciding to be practical, he chose a more affordable stove instead to keep his costs down. We see that his hard-earned money was nearly gone already, making it vital that this stall was a success. If it failed, his entire family would be left with nothing but the cold wind to eat. Soon, a mouth-watering aroma began to waft through the air, catching everyone's attention. Ruawe wondered what that delicious smell could be, asking Sanlang what exactly he was cooking. He invited her to try his creation, a traditional dish of wheaten cake boiled in meat broth, prepared with his own special touch. He explained it was a new recipe he'd been working on, asking Ruawe to give it a taste and see if it was actually as delicious as it smelled. Since it was his first time making it, he was relieved she enjoyed it. Deep down, he felt that if he took this to the streets, business would surely be booming. When he asked if she truly believed that, she confirmed it without a second thought. She finished the bowl, savoring every bite of the rich broth. He asked if she was full, offering to serve her another bowl from the pot, since there was plenty to go around. He shared his plan to set up a stall with this dish, wondering if customers would truly like it as much as she did. Ruawe was certain that people would flock to him, as this wheaten cake boiled in meat broth was simply incredible. She noted it was just as good as anything from a grand restaurant, adding that she wouldn't have eaten so much if she'd known he was selling it. Sanlang laughed, telling her that they shouldn't be stingy with their own food. After all, there was no shortage for the family. He realized time was running short, and he needed to head into the city quickly before his mother arrived and demanded an explanation. We see him preparing, knowing that running a stall is never as simple as it looks in stories. If he wasn't fully prepared, arriving in the city with a cold stove and no momentum would be a disaster. On a freezing day like this, no one would buy from a lukewarm pot. He knew that to make a real impact, he had to be willing to invest both his effort and his limited capital. Nearby, people began to notice a rich, savory aroma, wondering how something could smell so much like high-quality meat in such a remote spot. Some wondered if a famous restaurant had set up a stall nearby, though others found that idea quite impossible. One man remarked that he'd visited every restaurant in the county, yet none could produce a meat aroma quite this enticing. An old woman grumbled that the scent was so distracting she couldn't even focus on the play she was watching, a high compliment in its own way. A young man finally approached, unable to resist asking what kind of food Sanlang was selling that smelled so heavenly. Sanlang introduced it as wheaten cake boiled in meat broth, promising that every bowl was packed with rich, savory meat. He explained that it was served with white flour cakes and fresh green onions, a combination designed to satisfy any appetite. When asked about the price, he noted that a bowl of stewed meat was 8 coins, or 10 if you added the wheaten cake. He invited the customer to try a portion, promising a hearty mix of meat and noodles, topped with a bit of chili for heat. The customer agreed that in this freezing weather, a warm meal was essential, ordering a full bowl with the extra cake included. Sanlang responded with a cheerful nod, happy to serve his very first customer of the day. Suddenly, the crowd surged forward, with several voices calling out for their own bowls and extra wheaten cakes all at once. Another man demanded a bowl with extra pork intestines and a heavy scoop of chili, complaining about the miserable, biting cold. We see the logic here. A person needs something hot in their belly if they have any hope of finishing the outdoor play. As the coins began to pile up, Sanlang thanked everyone for their support, feeling a genuine sense of gratitude for the busy start. However, he soon had to apologize to the growing line, explaining that since it was his very first day on the job, he had only prepared a limited number of wheaten cakes, and they had already completely sold out. He informed the remaining customers that if they still wanted to buy, he could only offer the stewed meat on its own. After serving another bowl, he realized he had earned. He calculated that if things continued at this pace for the duration of the festival, he would be in a very good position. Deep down, he knew this was the breakthrough he needed to finally earn a significant amount of money. Later, at the market, a butcher called out to him, boasting that his pigs had been slaughtered just that morning and were perfectly fresh. Sanlang agreed that fresh meat was exactly what he needed for the next day's batch, nodding as they discussed the purchase. The two of them quickly came to an agreement, both satisfied with how the business was proceeding. Everything seemed to be falling into place, which, in a world like this, is usually the sign of a very good day. He confirmed the order for the fresh meat, confident that his new business venture was off to a flying start. The butcher boasted that the meat was incredibly fresh, asking Sanlang if he preferred the fatty cuts or the pork belly. He offered a discount on the price, but Sanlang had something else in mind, asking if the man had any pork offal available. When asked for the price of a set, the butcher held up 10 fingers, leading Sanlang to assume it was 10,000 coins. He thought to himself that it was quite a bargain, realizing that what he'd read in historical novels and dramas was actually true. In this era, pork offal was practically as cheap as dirt, and he felt certain he was about to make a fortune. The butcher looked at him in disbelief, asking if he was dreaming to suggest a set of offal would cost 10,000 coins. He argued that while offal is smelly and a hassle to clean, it is still meat, which makes it valuable. Since a full set weighed dozens of pounds, the butcher accused him of looking for trouble by offering such a ridiculous price. He insisted that if Sanlang was a serious buyer, he had to pay the market price of 5 silver taels, not a penny less. Sanlang pushed back, wondering why the man was being so harsh when he had simply misinterpreted the 10 fingers held up. The butcher clarified that he meant 100 coins, as a whole set of offal could never cost 10,000. He muttered that Sanlang looked like an honest man but seemed to be joking, then offered a final, serious price. He set the price at 80 coins per set, and Sanling quickly agreed, knowing a good deal when he heard one. The butcher brightened up, assuring his new friend that the offal was as fresh as it could possibly be. He confirmed it was all from that very day's slaughter, prompting Sanling to make a request for the following morning. Sanling asked the boss to set aside any fresh offal he might have tomorrow, and the man readily agreed. The butcher gave his word, promising that as soon as the pigs were slaughtered, the offal would be reserved for him. We see him later reflecting on how expensive medicine is, especially after spending a small fortune on spices to remove the gamey smell. Those few packets cost him 300 coins, though he told himself they would at least last for a while. And with that, his preparations for the next day were finally complete. Back at home, the children are waiting, as the eldest insists they must stay put just as their father instructed yesterday. He had gone out to do business, leaving them with the responsibility of looking after their mother and younger sister. And since they gave him their word, they simply couldn't go back on it now. The mother remarks with a smile that Arya has truly grown up, showing the poise of a proper older sister. Suddenly, the air is filled with excited shouts as the children spot a familiar figure returning. They rush to him, eager to know how his day in the city went and if his business was a success. They ask if he managed to earn any money, and he tells them not to worry for even a second. He assures them that business is thriving and that every bit of stock he prepared for the day has already sold out. With a flourish, he reveals a surprise, asking them to see what delicious treats he brought home for them. The children's eyes widen as they ask if these candied hawthorns were really bought just for them to eat. He confirms they are indeed for them, though he warns them to be careful while enjoying the sticky snacks. He cautions them not to get the syrup on their clothes, as the weather has turned quite cold lately. Since they don't have a change of clothes, he notes that cleaning off the sugar would be a difficult task. When they hesitate, he wonders for a moment if they actually dislike the treat, which seems impossible. He briefly questions if children in ancient times simply don't like candied fruit, but they quickly thank him with bright smiles. However, they insist that their father should take the first bite, as he has been working hard in the city all day. It was a sweet gesture, acknowledging just how much effort he had put in for the sake of the family. He takes a bite, and is instantly shocked to find the seeds are still inside, a sour surprise that nearly sets his teeth on edge. He quickly waves them off, jokingly claiming he isn't fond of sweets, and that one taste was more than enough. As Sanling settles in, his wife notes his return, asking if he's been spoiling the three girls with treats once again. He explains that he brought a stick of candied fruit for each of the children, though he reminds his wife she must avoid them while she's still recovering. He promises that once she's well, he'll buy her some too, to which she replies with a smile that she isn't a 3-year-old child anymore. She wonders why she'd need sweets, but admits she's mostly worried he might spoil the girls too much, though she has a secret to share. While he was away today, the three of them hovered around her constantly, asking only one thing: when their father would finally be home. As their father, he feels it's only natural to dote on them, believing that daughters should be raised with care and a bit of luxury. His goal is to provide them with the best life possible, so that when they eventually grow up and leave the nest, they won't be easily deceived by the sweet words or the cheap, empty gestures of some random, unworthy boys. He then asks if little Xiaowu has been fussy today, and his wife assures him the baby has been an absolute angel. Aside from being hungry or needing a change, the infant spent the day either sleeping soundly or playing quietly all by herself. He then presents the day's earnings, noting he hasn't had time to count it precisely, but estimates it's around 3 taels of silver. He hands it all over for her to keep, leaving her stunned that he could earn such a staggering amount in just a single day. She imagines that if they keep this up for a few more days, they'll be wealthy, though he gently points out it's not quite that simple. We see him explain that the initial costs haven't been deducted yet, including the stove, charcoal, flour, and the pork offal itself. However, even after accounting for those expenses, they are still looking at a very healthy profit of about 2 taels. He notes they were lucky to catch the crowds from the local festival, and warns that once the festivities end, business might slow down. It's unlikely they'll see this kind of traffic every day, a reality that makes Sanling's next gesture even more significant. She asks if he truly intends to trust her with all this money, and he replies that as his wife, it's only right that she manages their wealth. He tells her to save it for now, reminding her of his promise to redeem their eldest son, Daya, once they have enough. If their luck holds until the end of the festival, he believes they might actually reach that goal much sooner than expected. With a nod of agreement, she carefully tucks the silver away, holding on to the hope of bringing their family back together. He tells her that once they have saved enough, they will finally redeem their eldest daughter, Shuyuan. He can't help but wonder how the girl has fared these past 2 years, suffering for the sins of his former self. It's a heavy burden he must carry alone now, but for the moment, tomorrow's business takes priority. He heads out to the yard to clean the remaining pork offal, urging his wife to get some much-needed rest. We see him realize that cutting ties with the old family home will be far more difficult than he imagined. In the Dashing dynasty, where filial piety is law, breaking from one's family without cause is a serious crime. With survival still his main concern, he decides this particular problem will have to be handled slowly and carefully. Suddenly, a voice calls out. It's his younger brother, Woody, who has arrived to bring dinner for his sister-in-law. Samling has only just returned from the city, and the night air is growing quite cold. He takes the food from his brother, offering to bring it inside to his wife himself. He gently wakes her, letting her know that Woody has been kind enough to bring her a meal. She feels bad for the trouble, but Woody insists it's no trouble at all, which, to be honest, is quite sweet of him. He reminds her that she and Sanlang are the only ones who treat him well, so a simple meal is the least he can do. He admits he wanted their mother to cook something special, since she is still so weak after childbirth. However, the eldest sister-in-law was busy complaining about money, claiming they needed every penny for Qinhuang's education. Their mother always listens to her, refusing to spare even a single egg for her recovery, but she tells him it's fine. Sanlang tells her to rest while he prepares things, but Woody can't stop himself from venting his frustrations. It truly is absurd that they wouldn't even give her one egg, yet she remains remarkably patient through it all. She says she is grateful just to have a bowl of food, but Sanlang finally tells Woody to let the matter drop. He knows all too well how biased their parents are, and he assures her that things will change soon enough. Sanling looks at his brother and promises that he won't let his wife suffer any more grievances while by his side. Woody finds it quite strange, considering the watery, tasteless meals their family usually eats. He wonders how his sister-in-law has managed to maintain such a healthy glow under these conditions. He tells Sanlang that he has a few things to get off his chest, noting that his brother is simply too honest for his own good. He points out that while Sanlang obeys their parents, they clearly favor the eldest brother and his wife. Anything good goes straight to them, and as we saw during the family division, Sanlang ended up with nothing. Over the years, Qinhuang's education has completely drained the family's savings. Woody admits he also hopes the family can produce a scholar to bring honor to their ancestors. But as of now, there isn't even a hint of success on the horizon, which, to be honest, makes the sacrifice feel even heavier. He gestures toward the eldest brother and his wife, who act as if their noses are permanently stuck in the air. It's clear they no longer have any respect for the other brothers in the family. He notes that back then, even before Qinhuang's time, the inequality was already starting to show. Woody says he won't even mention the fact that he can't afford to marry a wife himself. After all, even if a girl were willing to marry into their family, she would only be coming here to suffer and be mistreated. Their fourth brother was even forced to marry into his wife's family just to survive, and then there is Sanlang himself. To pay for Qinhuang's schooling, Sanlang was pressured into selling his own eldest daughter. Yet despite all these sacrifices, it doesn't look like any of them will meet a good end. He knows he shouldn't speak this way, but he urges Sanlang to finally distinguish who truly matters in his life. His young daughters are his own flesh and blood, and they should surely come before anyone else. Sanlang nods, telling his brother that he understands everything he said and that he can finally rest easy. He assures Woody that he finally knows exactly what needs to be done from now on. He admits that in the past, he was far too foolishly loyal and handled things quite poorly. He promises it won't happen again, though, to be honest, he has made similar promises before. He had never been able to follow through, as his voice carried very little weight within the family hierarchy. Woody realizes that if he ever wants to marry and have a warm home of his own, he must join forces with Sanlang against the eldest brother's branch, hoping his brother truly understands this time. Of course, Woody's little scheme is perfectly harmless. After all, looking out for oneself is only natural. Sanlang knows that standing alone against the matriarch and the eldest brother isn't enough to protect Roei and the girls. To gain a real say in family matters, he needs Woody as a solid ally, so he turns to him with an offer. He mentions that he started a small business in the city and finds himself a bit overwhelmed working alone. He asks if Woody has any interest in joining him, leaving the younger brother wondering what kind of business it could be. Sanlang explains he's selling a new snack he developed called Stove Fire Biscuits, and the first day of sales went quite well. He acknowledges that Woody's earlier warnings came from a good place, and he truly appreciates the honesty. Since they've always been the closest among the siblings, Sanlang makes it clear that whenever something good comes along, his younger brother will always be the first person he thinks of. He points out that their parents are biased, and that the eldest brother is no better. And as for the eldest sister-in-law, well, her behavior speaks for itself. Even if Qinhuang eventually achieves fame and rank, it's unlikely any of that prosperity would ever reach them. Sanlang admits he can't offer a grand future yet, but he promises that once the money starts coming in, things will change. He tells Woody that they'll finally get him a wife, a dream the younger brother has long held, as every spare coin went toward Qinhuang's education. Woody wonders who would even think of him, but seeing Sanlang's sincerity, he agrees to listen, touched that his brother always thinks of him. He commits to working together, though a flicker of worry remains about what their parents will say when they find out. Sanlang remains unbothered, noting that they will find out sooner or later anyway, so it hardly matters when it happens. He assures Woody that he has already prepared a way to handle them, which brings a much-needed sense of relief to the younger brother. Woody eagerly asks for his first instructions, but Sanlang tells him there's no need to be so nervous about it all. It is, after all, just a small stall business. He simply needs Woody to wake up early tomorrow to help prepare the supplies. Once they reach the city, Woody's job will be simple, washing the dishes and handling the money as they sell to the crowds. Woody agrees to arrive first thing in the morning, though he still wonders what excuse to give their mother if she asks questions. Sanlang suggests a simple cover story. He is merely helping Woody find some honest work within the city. Later, we see Sanlang looking at the meager food sent over by the eldest brother's branch, knowing it's nowhere near enough to satisfy them. They'll make do with the steamed buns for now, but he is determined to cook something truly delicious for Roe and the children. Nearby, the eldest sister-in-law, Chun, stops in her tracks, wondering aloud who on earth is stewing meat and why it smells so heavenly. She laments how long it's been since she tasted meat, cursing whichever neighbor is living so well while she goes without. She imagines them hiding away to eat in secret, comforting herself with the thought that once her son Qin Wang becomes an official, she will eat meat at every single meal, and even the family dog will have its share. Just then, the matriarch calls out to her. The old woman asks what she's doing talking to herself in the yard, and Qin quickly claims she's just taking a walk after dinner. She mentions the incredible aroma of the stewed meat nearby, noting that their own family hasn't had a proper feast in ages. She suggests buying some meat in the city tomorrow, but the matriarch scoffs, reminding her that Qin Wang's school fees come first. The old woman shuts her down completely, telling her to stop her foolish dreaming and keep her greedy thoughts to herself. The matriarch snaps at her to get inside and clean the dishes and scrub the pots, complaining that she's too lazy to even lift a finger while the chores pile up like mountains. She scolds Chun for having no initiative at all. Chun quickly promises to do it, but then suggests that since Sanlang's wife has been resting for days after giving birth, she shouldn't be so pampered just for having a baby girl. To be honest, Chin's jealousy is hardly a well-kept secret. She proposes that Ruowei should start working tomorrow, or at the very least, they should put Sanlang's second child to work instead. She argues that the whole family shouldn't be allowed to eat for free. The old woman admits that in the past, she would have agreed immediately. However, after the scene Sanlang caused recently and the old man's decree not to bother his branch of the family, things have changed. If she goes back on her word now, she fears Sanlang will come back to cause more trouble. She tells Chun to stop comparing herself and just get to work. She tells her to stop dragging Ruowei into this. Even if she only gave birth to girls, they are still part of the Qin family bloodline. The matriarch reminds Chun that she isn't much better, having only produced one egg in all her years of marriage. If it weren't for Qin Wang's potential, she wouldn't have such a comfortable life either. She tells her to stop relying on Sanlang's wife and quit complaining about a few simple chores. Just then, Woody approaches his parents and announces that Sanlang has asked him to go to the city to work tomorrow, so they shouldn't cook for him. The old woman immediately demands to know what kind of work it is and how much it pays, clearly suspicious of this sudden opportunity. She repeats her demands, wanting to know exactly what he thinks he's doing and what this job entails. The interrogation continues as she presses him for details, her voice rising with every repetitive question. She seems stuck on the idea, asking over and over what possible business he could have in the city. It's a barrage of questions, as if she expects him to confess to some hidden scheme just by being asked enough times. She keeps pushing, demanding to know his intentions and why he's suddenly so eager to leave the house. She mentions that if he's going to the city, he should be bringing something back for the family instead of just looking out for himself. She stares him down, telling him that he's already said enough, and she wants the real truth behind this plan. She concludes that the room and the situation simply cannot remain as they are, signaling that she won't let this matter drop so easily. He tells him to remember to bring the food, making sure he doesn't forget a single thing. We return to the next morning, where Sanlang is surprised to find Woody awake so early, asking how he could possibly be up already. Woody admits that it is indeed early, but to be honest, ever since he heard he'd be doing business with his brother, he couldn't close his eyes. He was so excited he didn't sleep a wink all night. After all, he's never done business in his entire life and couldn't stop tossing and turning. He figured it was better to come over early and help out, asking Sanlang if there's anything at all he needs him to do. Sanlang simply tells him to go and start the fire. Woody watches in confusion, asking what on earth his brother is doing putting pig offal into the pot. He reminds him that this stuff is fishy and stinking, and even for poor folk like them who rarely eat meat, it's hardly appetizing. He wonders aloud if Sanlang actually plans to sell this, doubting that anyone would ever be willing to buy it. Sanlang smiles, telling him he doesn't understand yet. He's already cleaned the offal thoroughly until not a trace of the smell remains. He explains that after being braised with his secret recipe, it will taste even better than pork, promising that once it's finished, Woody will understand exactly what he means after just one taste. He encourages him to try the flavor first, noting that once the offal is braised, soaking these flatbreads in the broth will be truly delicious. Woody is stunned by the aroma, exclaiming that it smells incredible and questioning if this really came from pig offal. Sanlang asks if he didn't just see it with his own eyes, teasing him for no longer thinking it's fishy or stinking. He explains that many ingredients smell bad but taste wonderful, like stinky tofu, which is perfectly edible despite the scent. Sanlang reflects privately that people in this era haven't seen much, and he realizes that with his knowledge, he has plenty of room to thrive. He assures Woody it's safe to eat and tells him to just stick with his big brother from now on. He promises that Woody will get to eat many delicacies he has never even dreamed of before. He tells Woody to keep eating while he takes a bowl to his wife, urging him to fill his stomach in the meantime. Sandling explains that he left some flatbreads in the pot for the girls to eat if they get hungry, though he didn't leave them any braised offal. His main concern, as we see, is that if others found out they had such food, the children wouldn't be able to protect it while he's away. He worries they might suffer for a bit of food with no one there to defend them, but Woody tells him not to worry. Woody promises that he will take good care of the children while they are gone. Later, they arrive at a temple fair complete with an opera performance, and Woody asks in awe how his brother found such a perfect spot. Sandling explains he discovered it by chance during a trip to town. The local magistrate hired the troupe for the Earth God, and yesterday was only the first day. The troupe will likely perform for 5 or 6 days, and when Woody asks if they'll stay that long, Sandling notes how lively and crowded it is. He has no intention of leaving until their pockets are full, telling Woody to stop staring and lend a hand. He emphasizes that they must make the most of their time, noting that the braised offal and bread he brought yesterday sold out completely. They will monitor the situation today, and if they run out again, he plans to increase their stock for tomorrow. Business begins immediately as a customer approaches, calling out for the boss with great enthusiasm. The man asks for a bowl of the braised offal, praising how flavorful and filling it is after having tried it the day before. He admits he spent the whole night thinking about the taste and skipped breakfast just to wait for them. Sandling thanks him for the high praise. Since he is their very first customer of the day, Sandling sets to work immediately to prepare his meal. He offers to add a little extra meat and asks if the man wants chili oil, to which the customer eagerly agrees. The man notes that their chili is excellent, fragrant without being overly spicy, as Sandling hands over the bowl and mentions the weather. He remarks that eating something spicy to work up a sweat is the best way to stay warm in this cold. Woody watches in total disbelief, thinking that his brother, usually so quiet and dull, seems like a completely different person when doing business. He can't help but exclaim aloud how incredible Sandling is at handling everything so smoothly. Sandling simply replies that it isn't that difficult once you get the hang of it, assuring Woody that after yesterday's practice, he can do it too. Woody beams, telling Sandling he always knew his brother was the best before heading off to get to work. Before long, the pot is empty, and Sandling has to thank the crowd while announcing that the braised offal is officially sold out. He suggests that anyone still hungry should return tomorrow, as they'll be setting up their stall in the exact same spot. One customer begs them to make more, noting the aroma travels for miles, but Sandling can only offer his sincere thanks for the support. He explains that while he appreciates the praise, cleaning the offal is a difficult task, and he refuses to compromise on hygiene. Our chef adds that his secret recipe uses precious medicinal herbs for health, and he is already pushing his limits to produce this much. He promises to prepare more for the next day, but for now, the business is closed and the crowd begins to disperse. Just then, a butcher calls out to him, addressing him as a brother in trade. Sandling offers to drop the price by 10 when if the man takes the remaining stock, and the deal is struck immediately. The original price was 81%, but for 2, Sandling generously lets them go for only 150. He tells himself that with the temple fair crowds, the extra hard work is well worth the profit they are making. The butcher agrees to take both sets of offal, but he has one small request for the boss. He asks if Sandling can throw in some large bones for free, and Sandling hands them over without a second thought. He handed Sange his wages for the day, wondering why the man was hesitating. After all, Sange had been working hard alongside him since morning. He tells Woody he earned it, but Woody protests, insisting that they are brothers and he shouldn't be paid. Woody refuses the money, reminding Sandling that this profit was supposed to be saved so he could eventually afford a wife. He jokingly asks if his brother is changing his mind about the wedding fund, urging him to speak up. We learn that Woody, often called Daya, has always been a sensible child, and Sandling felt for him when their mother almost sold him. Back then, Sandling had disagreed with paying the tax to King Chin by selling his brother, but they were both too powerless to speak up. Finally, Sandling tells him to stop dwelling on the past. As long as they keep working hard, their future looks bright. Sandling promises that they will one day make something of themselves, though Woody insists he only cares about his brother saving enough for a wife. Sandling tells him to take the wages anyway, reminding him that even brothers should keep clear accounts and that his promises will never change. Woody suggests that Sandling should keep the money for now, promising to return it later if he takes it home today. He thanks his brother but remains hesitant, knowing that if he brings the coins home, they won't stay in his pockets for long. He admits that his mother or sister-in-law would eventually take it, so he feels much safer leaving it with Sandling and his wife. Sandling nods, agreeing that if that is the case, he will keep the earnings safe for the time being. He tells the boy that whenever he actually needs the money, he is welcome to come and collect it at any time. We return to the house, where the children brighten up immediately, calling out to their father and Uncle Woody as they return. Sandling asks how they've been and if they were well behaved at home, to which they proudly claim they were perfect angels. One daughter explains she even helped her mother change the baby's diaper, and they made sure not to step foot outside all day. They stayed by their mother and sister's side the whole time, prompting Samlang to ask if they've had anything to eat yet. They tell him they had breakfast when their grandmother brought over 2 steamed buns and a bowl of coarse rice porridge. Their mother had claimed she wasn't hungry, telling the girls that if they felt famished, they should try to cook something for themselves. There was coarse rice in the jar that Samlang had bought in the city, but the girls were afraid that if the chimney started smoking, their grandmother or aunt would notice and come to investigate. To be honest, their caution was probably well-founded. Samlang pulls out some treats he bought at the temple fair, telling the girls to take them and share them amongst themselves. Woody observes with a smile that the girls have seemed much more lively lately, clearly realizing they are being spoiled by their father. Samlang simply replies that since they are his daughters, he naturally intends to spoil them, as raising girls is quite different from raising sons. He believes they must be provided for so that in the future, they won't be easily deceived by some boy's sweet talk or small favors. With that bit of fatherly wisdom shared, he tells Woody to help him unload the remaining offal and the bags of white flour from the cart. He tells Woody to boil a pot of hot water for cleaning the offal while he goes to check on his wife. "You got it, Samlang," Woody replies, heading off to start the fire as requested. Inside, his wife looks up with a tired smile, simply saying, "You're back." He notices her sewing and immediately tells her to stop, worried that she'll strain her eyes while she's still recovering. He warns her about long-term health risks, but she insists she's fine, having given birth several days ago already. She explains that watching him work from dawn to dusk makes her feel like she should contribute something to the household. Samlang reminds her that as the man of the house, providing for her and the children is entirely his responsibility. He tells her that even if she wants to help, her health must come first during this delicate time. He repeats his firm belief that his role is to support the family, urging her not to worry about chores. He insists that if she wants to make clothes for the children, she must wait until her recovery period is fully over. Since loose copper coins are a hassle to keep track of, he explains that he's exchanged them for solid silver pieces. He hands over the 2 taels of silver, noting that their unique business is currently the only one of its kind. The key to their success, he notes, was the prime location at the temple fair while the opera was in town. He acknowledges that the crowds won't last forever, and he was lucky to have Woody there to help manage the rush. With the two of them working together, they were just barely able to keep up with the overwhelming demand. Woody mentions he once heard that wealthy families used expensive white flour to clean out pig intestines. He is amazed to see that simple wood ash can actually absorb all the slime and the pungent, gamey odor. He laments not knowing this trick sooner, but Samlang explains that wood ash is alkaline and has many hidden uses. As the day begins to fade, Samlang suggests to Woody that it's time they pack up the stall and head home. Woody glances at the sky, noting the sun is still high and wondering if they should wait just a bit longer. Samlang explains that it simply won't work, as they still need to buy ingredients for tomorrow and clean everything once they get back. Woody nods in agreement, deciding that it's best to start packing up their stall right then and there. Suddenly, a voice calls out from ahead, asking the 2 young men to wait just a moment. The man catches his breath and asks if they are the ones selling that new kind of food. Samlang confirms they sell the wheaten cake boiled in meat broth, but politely notes that they've already finished for the day. He suggests the man return tomorrow if he's hungry, but the stranger sighs, realizing he has arrived far too late. To be honest, the man explains his master heard about this new dish at the temple fair and sent him specifically to find it. He had run all the way from the eastern part of the city, only to find the stall closing up. While the wheaten cakes are gone, Samlang mentions he still has some of the braised meat and offal left over. He offers it to the man, suggesting it would make an excellent side dish to go with some wine. The man agrees immediately, telling them he'll take whatever they have left in the pot. We see Samlang gesture toward the pot, inviting the man to see if the remaining amount is enough for his needs. The man insists on taking all of it, asking Samlang to pack it up for him right away. When asked for the price, Samlang calculates that the remaining portions would normally be worth about 1 tael of silver. However, since the man is taking everything at once and saving them the trouble of waiting, he offers a discount. He tells the man that 800 copper cash will be plenty, as it simplifies things for everyone involved. He repeats the offer of 800 cash, clearly happy to clear out his stock so they can finally head home. The man hands over the money, telling them to keep the change without a second thought. He explains the extra 200 cash is a tip, noting that his master is certainly not short on silver. With a final word, he promises that if the food is as good as they say, he'll be back again tomorrow. Woody beams at the extra coins, remarking to Samlang that this must be what it feels like to receive a proper tip. He wonders aloud who that man could possibly be, marveling at someone generous enough to hand over an extra 200 cash. It seems they've made a tidy profit today, and with a satisfied grin, he decides that's enough work for now. Samlang, ever the pragmatist, reminds him that the man was just a customer and there's no need to be so curious about his life. A nearby vendor, Boss Chin, notes that the opera performance is nearly over and strikes up a conversation. He asks where they plan to set up their stall next, but Samlang admits he isn't quite sure yet. He mentions that he'll likely take a few days to rest at home before deciding on a new location. The man asks if he's considered opening a permanent shop, but Samlang confesses the thought hadn't even crossed his mind. The neighbor explains that a fixed location would make it much easier for regular customers to find their delicious boiled wheaten cakes. Sanling thanks him for the kind words, though he admits he doesn't have the spare cash for a shop and just needs a break. He promises to look for a new spot eventually, adding that once he saves enough, a shop might actually be a good idea. Since the rush has died down, Sanling suggests they eat a bit more themselves, seeing as they don't have to work tomorrow. He tells Woody they can stay a little later tonight, allowing the boy to enjoy the rest of the opera once he's finished eating. Woody is touched by the gesture, telling Sanling that he really is far too kind to him. Sanling asks why he likes the opera so much, wondering if it's because the performers look so grand and powerful on stage. Woody admits that isn't it at all. His interest stems mostly from the fact that opera troupes are known to eat very well. He had heard a rumor that they get to eat meat every few days, which, to him, sounds like the ultimate luxury. Nearby, the crowd erupts in cheers, praising the performers' skill and the excellent quality of the show. It turns out this is the famous Yumingtang troupe, a group well known for their prestige and talent. Usually, they only perform for wealthy families, and it was only because of the local magistrate that they came here at all. The magistrate had to personally send an invitation just to get the troupe leader to agree to perform. We learn that the locals feel they are only enjoying this high-quality show thanks to the magistrate's influence. The people are overflowing with gratitude toward the master, knowing that without him, this wouldn't be possible. They simply wouldn't have had the good fortune to witness such a prestigious performance. The magistrate tells his attendant, Chen Lu, to stop with the blatant flattery. He dismisses the praise, telling Chen Lu that there's no need for such sycophancy over a simple opera. His only intention in hiring the troupe was to give the common folk a bit of excitement and joy. To him, ensuring the people are well-fed and warm is far more vital than any number of grand performances. Changing the subject, he asks where those boiled wheaten cakes from before were bought, wanting to try them himself. Chen Lu points out that the two young men selling them are just over there, inviting the master to follow him. It seems the master isn't the only one craving them. Chen Lu admits he's been thinking about that taste as well. Meanwhile, we see Sanling shaking his head, prompting Woody to ask if he finds the opera boring. Sanling admits it really isn't that impressive, feeling that the performance lacks any real soul or creativity. He finds the story cliché and the singing unrefined, claiming that if this is the standard, he could do better. He boasts that he could easily come up with something similar, though Woody seems a bit skeptical. Woody reminds him that opera requires years of training and isn't quite the same as running a business. Sanling, however, insists it isn't that difficult and claims he could perform a piece right then and there. To be honest, Sanling's confidence is often his most entertaining trait. He repeats his claim, certain that he could give them a show that would put the professionals to shame. Suddenly, a voice calls out to him, addressing him by his full name, Qinlang. A voice rings out, praising the performance as even better than the famous singers of Yumming Hall. Others chime in, marveling at the beautiful and unique style they've never heard before. The magistrate, Chun, approaches and tells the young man that he is being far too humble. He admits that although he has traveled far and wide and considers himself quite cultured, he has truly never encountered a play quite like the one Qinlang just performed. Curious, he asks if the young man would be willing to share the name of this particular opera. Qinlang explains that the piece is called Red Mane Wild Horse, a grand story spanning 13 acts. It tells the tale of Xue Pingwei and Wang Baochuan, a couple reunited after 18 long years apart. It's the classic story of a noble lady and a poor boy, featuring famous segments like the colorful pavilion match. He notes there are 13 parts in total, and the one he just sang was the famous Wujia Slope. The magistrate remarks that while the rich girl and poor boy trope is common, this version feels far more meaningful. He finds it fascinating that a noble daughter would spend 18 years digging wild herbs for her love. By the time her husband returned as a king, she was old and withered, a bittersweet reward for her loyalty. To be honest, one has to wonder if such a happy ending isn't actually a tragedy in disguise. Qinlang modestly replies that he only happened to learn the story by chance, noting that when we watch opera, we are often just looking for beauty while feeling the characters' hardships, much like the lives of common folk. He speaks of the struggle to gather silver and grain, living a life of constant, busy toil just to survive. Deep down, he knows that those who haven't lived through such hardship can never truly feel the weight of it. The magistrate repeats the words, struck by the raw honesty of the description of a laborer's life. He admits that while he hasn't personally experienced that level of exhaustion, he is moved by the sentiment. The magistrate admits he understands their struggles, noting that their braised pork wheaten cake smells quite delicious. With a friendly gesture, he asks for 2 bowls to be served for himself and his companion. Qinlang serves them with a polite smile, telling the 2 distinguished guests to take their time and enjoy the meal. He knew that to truly connect with customers, one must speak their language, adapting his words to whoever sat at the table. It was a matter of survival, really, speaking sense to the sensible and nonsense to those who lived in shadows. As the day winds down, he tells the remaining customers he's closing up, deciding to save the leftover meat for his children. and so he begins to pack his things, ready to head home after a long day of work. Nearby, a vendor wonders why the opera stage is being taken down so soon, wishing they could have stayed a few more days. Another mentions that the county office paid for these performances, and word is that their magistrate is actually an honest official. To be honest, providing such entertainment for the people is already a rare kindness in these times. They agree that a corrupt official would have simply used the event as an excuse to squeeze more taxes from the poor. However, when Qin Lang arrives home, he finds his family in tears and demands to know who has dared to bully them. He looks at his daughter, Shuyun, and asks her to tell him exactly what happened while he was away. His voice trembles with a mix of fear and rage as he asks who was responsible for the slap mark on her face. Shuyun cries that it was their eldest aunt. She explains that they were eating the cakes their father had left for them. They had only taken 2 bites when the aunt suddenly appeared, accusing them of being sneaky and ungrateful. She claimed they were stealing food behind the family's back and violently snatched the cakes away from the hungry children. Not content with just taking the food, she beat them and struck Shuyun across the face before their mother could intervene. When their mother tried to reason with her, the aunt began hurling insults, mocking her for not raising the children properly. The aunt continued her tirade, showing no mercy even as their mother tried to defend her children's right to eat. She claimed our mother couldn't even give birth to a son, calling us nothing but money-losing burdens. Qin Lang realized he had been far too patient. Clearly, his previous warnings had fallen on deaf ears. He promised his children he would get them justice right then, even as his wife, Sang Sang, begged him not to go. She urged him to go and check on the situation quickly, fearing that something truly terrible might happen. He agreed to go and see, gently telling Sang Sang not to worry while he handled the matter. Upon arriving at the main house, his mother asked why he wasn't in the city working as usual. She wondered why he was back so early, but he countered that if he hadn't returned, he never would have known his wife and children were being bullied, a claim his mother dismissed as nonsense. She insisted that since his wife was part of the Qin family, no one would dare lay a finger on them. She even claimed that bullying them would be an insult to her, and she would never allow it. Qin Lang noted that it was Chun Sunyang who hit his daughter, inviting his mother to take action, as she promised. He suggested this would save him the trouble of doing it himself, but his mother hesitated, claiming he must be mistaken. She couldn't believe it was the eldest sister-in-law, stammering in disbelief as she tried to process his accusation. He asked if she thought his daughter, Arya, was lying, or if she simply intended to keep playing favorites. He warned her that if she chose to protect the woman blindly, she might as well consider her son gone forever. The mother, feeling the pressure, finally called out for Chun Sunyang to come outside immediately. Chun Sunyang appeared, innocently asking if it was time to start cooking the family meal. As she turned to leave, the mother stopped her, demanding to know if she had truly struck young Arya. Chun Sunyang quickly claimed it was all a misunderstanding, insisting that such a thing never actually happened. She argued that a child's words couldn't be taken seriously, but Qin Lang knew that children are the ones who never lie. Even if a child's words are unreliable, Qin Lang pointed out that Ruowei was there too, unless, of course, she was lying as well. The mother turned on Chun Sunyang, scolding her for ignoring the warnings and choosing to bully the children anyway. Old Mrs. Qin issued a stern warning, terrified that provoking Qin Lang further would lead him to stop working entirely. Chun Sunyang argued that as an elder, she had every right to discipline a girl with such poor character for stealing food. When asked what exactly was stolen, she claimed the girl had taken a white flour cake. She insisted she didn't know where it was stolen from, but feared the village would slander the family if they found out. She maintained that her actions were purely for the sake of the family's reputation, a convenient excuse, to be sure. The mother shifted her stance, telling Qin Lang his sister-in-law had a point if Arya was indeed out stealing. She worried about where the Qin family would hide their faces, especially since young Wang was a scholar. He was meant to take the imperial exams. After all, it was a masterful attempt to flip the blame onto the victim. Qin Lang remarked that he had seen many shameless people, but never anyone quite as rogue as her. He demanded she produce evidence of the theft, warning her not to blame him for being impolite if she couldn't. Chun Sunyang scoffed, asking what more evidence was needed when she had caught the girl red-handed. She asked if he really thought she would wrong the girl, to which he simply challenged her to explain the details. He told her to name exactly whose chicken or dog was stolen, so they could go and verify the truth immediately. If her story proved true, he declared he would be more than willing to go and offer a formal apology. But if she had framed his daughter, he warned her that his fists wouldn't be so discriminating. The mother tried to end the dispute, telling Chun Sunyang to leave, as a woman like her couldn't possibly understand the stakes. Chun Sunyang stammered that while she hadn't seen the theft, the white flour cake in the girl's hand was undeniable proof. She questioned where it came from, noting that even the parents couldn't afford such a luxury. And what kind of cake was it, anyway? Qin Lang challenged her to produce the evidence, leaving Chun Sunyang looking utterly guilty as she stammered, unable to find her words. The truth was that the white flour cake she had snatched was already in her stomach, making it impossible to show anyone. He turned to his mother, asking if she had seen enough to understand the reality of the situation. He noted that his sister-in-law had truly gone too far, beating his daughter for no reason at all. We see him remind them that young Wang was supposed to be a man of honor, often quoting that a man without shame is better off dead. Since his sister-in-law had committed such a shameless act and disgraced the family, he suggested perhaps she should follow that advice. Chun Sunyang recoiled, calling him black-hearted for trying to drive her to her death over such a small matter. She reminded them that she was a great contributor to the Qin family, having given them their only male heir. She accused them of discarding her like a useless tool once her job was done, but Qin Lang sharply told her to shut her mouth. He warned her that his patience had run out, and she shouldn't push him to the point of violence. He made it clear that he didn't care about her usual dramatic tricks or threats of making a scene. Unless she gave him a proper explanation for today's events, he simply refused to let the matter rest. Outside, the neighbors began to notice the commotion, wondering why the Qin household was suddenly so lively and full of shouting. It certainly looked like a major fight. After all, Qin Lang was known for being a hard-working man who never complained. He was usually as steady as an ox, so the neighbors were shocked to see him fueled by such an intense, burning rage. They whispered that with the way the old lady and the eldest brother's family treated him, even the best temper would eventually snap. The rumors started flying immediately, with some wondering if the family was actually planning to sell off his daughter. Old Mrs. Qin snapped at the onlookers, telling them they must have nothing better to do than spread nonsense and stick their noses in her business. She barked that every family had their own dirty laundry, and their own homes were likely just as messy as hers. She demanded to know why they were enjoying her family's misfortune, shouting at everyone to stop the chaotic noise at once. She shouted that they hadn't provided enough of a spectacle for the outsiders yet, it seemed. She demanded to know why they couldn't just close the doors and resolve their family matters in private. Old Mr. Qin finally spoke up, telling Qin Lang to speak calmly while promising to settle the matter, before turning his gaze toward Qin Sunyang. He told her to stop making a fool of herself with her constant crying, screaming, and empty threats of ending it all. He warned her that if she tarnished young Wang's reputation, he would personally see to it that his eldest son divorced her. The eldest brother, Qin Feng, stepped forward, asking if his third brother was truly determined to stand against him. He sneered, asking if Qin Lang had considered the future, especially since he didn't even have a son to carry his name. Qin Lang looked at him, thinking he was a complete fool for bringing that up now. Chun Sunyang, meanwhile, continued to wail, accusing Qin Lang of wanting her dead over and over again. Qin Lang simply watched them, marveling at the fact that even at a time like this, they remained so utterly delusional. He couldn't have cared less about their empty threats, and we see him prepare to take action as he stepped forward. He lived by a principle of not hitting women, but he made it clear that didn't apply to the men of the house. He wasn't one for underhanded tricks. If someone provoked him, he believed in settling the debt immediately, which left Chun Sunyang wondering what was happening. She cried out, asking how her husband could have fallen so suddenly, noticing that his mouth was covered in blood. Qin Feng could barely speak, realizing that something was very, very wrong. He sputtered in shock, realizing that his teeth had actually been knocked out. He glared at Qin Lang, calling him a black-hearted, rotten wretch for what he had done. He reminded him that he was his elder brother, asking how he could possibly be so cruel and ruthless. He cursed him as a disrespectful and unfilial creature, swearing that he would beat him to death right then and there. Qin Lang remained unmoved, noting that he hadn't even settled the score yet, and wondered why his brother was accusing him after simply falling down on his own. He pointed out that since the eldest brother and his wife were one, he surely must have known about everything she had done. He wondered aloud if this was simply karma catching up to him, which only made Qin Feng snap that his younger brother's wings had grown too strong. Qin Feng accused him of harming his own flesh and blood without admitting it, swearing that once his son, Hur, passed the exams, Qin Lang would be the first to pay. He threatened to make him taste 18 levels of torture, proving once and for all that he never had any intention of treating his brother well. As the saying goes, only the one who frames you knows exactly how innocent you truly are. Qin Lang decided then and there that he would let them be trapped by the very web of lies they had spun for themselves. His eldest brother had finally spoken the truth, revealing that all those promises they had made were nothing but air. We see the realization hit him, the idea that the whole family should sacrifice everything for Qin Wang's education so he could achieve success, and that everyone would share in the prosperity afterward, was a complete and utter lie. It had been a deception from the very beginning, designed to bleed him dry. He lamented his own blindness, feeling a deep sense of shame for having actually believed their words were true. Because of that misplaced trust, he had even agreed to sell his own biological daughter, a thought that now filled him with horror. He cursed himself, feeling that he deserved the worst for being so foolishly complicit in his own family's ruin. The neighbors whispered that the eldest Qin brother was truly a piece of work, especially considering how much Qin Lang had sacrificed for his nephew's schooling. To sell one's own daughter only to end up like this was a tragedy, and they noted how arrogant Qin Feng was acting before his son had even passed a single exam. They joked that if his son actually succeeded, he'd probably think he owned the heavens, advising each other to stay away from such people while telling Qin Lang to wake up. They told him he should have loved his own daughter instead of his nephew, and Qin Lang could only agree that the villagers were right. He admitted he deserved this for his lack of judgment, acknowledging that he had failed to see people for who they truly were. He vowed that it would never happen again, just as old Mr. Chin barked at his eldest son to stop talking such nonsense. The old man reminded them all just how much the third brother had contributed to the household and how much he had sacrificed for Wanger's studies. Old Mr. Chin roared at his eldest son, asking how he could possibly say such things and if he had even a shred of conscience left. Qin Feng scrambled to explain, insisting it wasn't his fault and claiming that Qin Lang had secretly tripped him from behind. He demanded that his younger brother explain himself to the crowd, still maintaining that Qin Lang was the one who started it. Qin Lang looked at him, realizing his brother was determined to frame him just to avoid becoming a laughingstock in front of the neighbors. He sighed, feeling that all the years of sacrifice he had given to this family had finally been proven to be a tragic mistake. Suddenly, the fifth brother, Lao Wu, stepped forward, claiming he could testify to what had actually happened. Qin Feng's face lit up, thinking someone was finally going to clear his name in front of their parents and the villagers. But Lao Wu spoke clearly, stating he had seen everything, and that Qin Lang was actually standing quite a distance away from the eldest brother. There had been no tripping at all. It was plain to see that Qin Feng had simply stumbled and fallen all on his own. He pointed out that his eldest brother was merely trying to shift the blame, likely holding a grudge over the events of the past few days. It seemed this was petty revenge because Qin Lang had refused to let his daughter, Arya, do the eldest brother's laundry anymore. Qin Feng hissed that the two of them must be in league together, accusing them of ganging up to bully him. He turned on Lao Wu, asking what bribe Qin Lang had offered him, wondering if a few days of work in the city was enough to buy his loyalty. He warned his younger brother not to be so short-sighted, as though a temporary job could compare to the family's future. He reminded him that once his son, Wanger, passed the exams and became a high-ranking official, there would be endless wealth for everyone. To be honest, it was a tired argument, but Qin Feng clung to it, as if it were his only shield. Qin Lang spoke up, acknowledging that while Lao Wu was an honest man, their eldest brother did have a point about the future. He noted that if they truly were destined to become powerful officials, then telling the truth now was effectively making an enemy of them. He looked at Lao Wu with genuine concern, wondering aloud what might happen if the eldest brother decided to seek revenge later on. The thought hung in the air, a quiet comment on the absurdity of a family that used a child's potential success as a weapon against its own blood. The silence that followed was heavy, as everyone waited for the truth to finally surface. Old Mr. Qin looked around and demanded that they all speak up and explain exactly what was going on. Qin Lang explained that his sister-in-law had barged into his home, beaten his daughter, and falsely accused the girl of being a thief. He looked directly at his parents, stating firmly that if he didn't receive a proper explanation for this today, they would have to officially divide the family estate, a suggestion that immediately drew a roar of "bastard" from his father. The old man shouted, asking what kind of nonsense he was talking about, reminding him that children do not leave while parents are still alive. He questioned where Qin Lang had cast his sense of filial piety, that sacred bond between father and son. Qin Lang countered that he could only be a filial son if his parents actually saw him as one. Otherwise, there was no point in forcing it. He acknowledged he knew the law forbade dividing the family while parents lived, but he wasn't backing down. He suggested they let the county magistrate decide the matter of right and wrong, as even the law makes room for human sentiment. If the fault truly lay with him, he declared he was perfectly willing to accept whatever punishment the government saw fit. He added that it would be quite a sight for everyone to see what kind of parents Qin Wang truly had. And we can only imagine how such a scandal would affect the boy's reputation while he tried to study at the county school. Old Mr. Qin turned his fury toward his daughter-in-law, calling her a troublemaker and blaming her for starting this entire mess. He told her she must give Qin Lang a proper explanation today, or he would force his eldest son to divorce her. He even threatened to send her back to her maiden home, prompting her to cry out that he couldn't be so heartless. She reminded them that she was Wanger's biological mother and the one who had given the Qin family their only male grandson. She pleaded that they couldn't treat her this way, but the old man simply gave her the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. He told her that if she weren't Wanger's mother, he would have had his eldest son cast her out a long time ago. He reminded her of all the years she had spent acting like a tyrant in the house and pushing her own brothers-in-law aside. He scolded her for bullying her brother's wives, noting that if it weren't for Wanger's studies, the family would have never tolerated her presence. He demanded she tell the truth about what happened, so she claimed she had originally gone to visit the third brother's wife. She alleged that she found the children in the courtyard secretly eating pancakes, and not just any pancakes. They were made of fine white flour. They were fried golden brown and smelled delicious, and she claimed she only stepped in because she feared the girl's thievery would ruin Wanger's reputation. She argued she didn't want the boy to be ashamed at the academy, so she taught them a lesson, but then Qin Lang asked where the pancakes were. He pointed out that to catch a thief, one needs the stolen goods, and if they were eating white flour pancakes, he wanted to see the evidence. She stammered that she hadn't had time to collect them yet, but it was clear to everyone that even now, she was struggling to keep her story straight. Qin Lang noted that his sister-in-law was still trying to hide the truth and suggested they follow their father's advice and send her back to her maiden home. He declared that if his eldest brother didn't have the courage to do it, he and the fifth brother would personally escort her away. They wanted the Chun family to know exactly what kind of person she was, and the fifth brother immediately agreed to go along with the plan. And so, they prepared to leave right then and there, which finally broke her resolve. She begged them to stop, finally admitting that while she did see the white flour pancakes, the temptation had been too much for her. In a moment of pure selfishness, she had actually eaten the pancakes herself. Qin Lang's wife was appalled, noting that her sister-in-law was a habitual liar who stole food and then framed an innocent child for the crime. She asked how they could ever trust her again, while Qin Lang turned to his parents, demanding a final resolution to this madness. He insisted on a proper explanation today, though he couldn't help but wonder how deep the deception really went. He openly questioned if his eldest brother had been in on the scheme, prompting the man to swear he knew nothing about Chen Sunyang's actions. The eldest brother turned on his wife in a rage, calling her a fool for framing a child and bringing shame upon their son, Wang. He ordered her to apologize to the third brother immediately and beg for his forgiveness, hoping to salvage what was left of their dignity. With no other choice, she turned to Qin Lang and apologized, admitting that the entire mess had been her fault. She admitted she shouldn't have hit the child without knowing the facts, begging Qin Lang to forgive her just this once. However, he coldly replied that the person she owed an apology to wasn't him, but his young daughter, Arya. The woman was stunned, asking in disbelief if he truly expected her to apologize to a mere little girl. To her, such a thing seemed impossible, but Qin Lang simply noted that if she was unwilling, he had no other choice. The eldest brother, calling her a disgrace, told her they would have to proceed with their father's plan to send her away. He warned Chen Sunyang that since she was in the wrong, she must apologize to Arya if she wanted to stay. She protested that as an elder, she couldn't possibly bow to a child, an argument that, frankly, held no weight here. Her husband snapped back, asking where her dignity as an elder was when she was hitting and framing children. He told her to go back to her maiden home as he was done with her, finally forcing her to reconsider the apology. He urged her to end this before Qin Lang's anger ruined their son Wanger's future prospects at the academy. He warned that if she were divorced now, she would have no share in Wanger's eventual success and glory. She realized she couldn't be kicked out now. If she left, she would lose everything she had worked for as a mother. Deep down, she told herself she would endure this now and find a way to deal with Qin Lang and the girls later. With a forced sigh, she finally conceded, admitting that the entire mess was indeed her fault. She announced to the room that she was willing to go and offer her apology to little Arya. Qin Lang then asked the fifth brother to bring Arya over, promising the child she had nothing to fear while he was there. When the little girl arrived, he comforted her gently, assuring her that her father was right by her side. He called her by her name, Shuyun, promising that today he would finally see that justice was done for her. The aunt finally spoke, telling Arya that everything that happened today had been her own mistake. She claimed she only acted out of fear that the white flour pancakes were stolen, worried the girl might lead her sisters astray. She claimed she only struck the girl to protect her brother's reputation as a scholar, and for that, she offered a hollow apology. She then asked, with a forced smile, if Arya could find it in her heart to stop being angry with her. We see the shock on little Arya's face. She had never imagined, even in her wildest dreams, that her aunt would apologize. Qin Lang looked at his daughter and told her that, in this matter, he would follow her lead entirely. He said she could forgive if she wished, but Arya remembered the 2 sharp slaps she had received on her face. To be honest, she realized she simply couldn't bring herself to offer forgiveness so easily after everything that had happened. The aunt's mask slipped instantly as she called Arya a brat, snapping that she had given the girl far too much respect. She shouted that she had already humbled herself to apologize and was outraged that the girl still refused to forgive her. In her eyes, a girl like Arya had no right to refuse an apology, which tells you everything you need to know about her. Qin Lang noted dryly that this was quite the apology, admitting that his sister-in-law's attitude was truly eye-opening. He suggested that perhaps it was time to officially split the family, a proposal that his father immediately called absolute nonsense. The old man barked that since he and the mother were still alive, they shouldn't make the family a laughingstock by talking of splitting. Qin Lang pointed out that it was clear this household no longer had any room for him or his daughter, Arya. He told them to just let him leave, feeling that his parents no longer truly saw him as their son anyway. He accused them of only pretending to offer justice, while actually expecting him and his daughter to just endure the mistreatment. The father countered that the family was already living and eating separately, so it wasn't much different from a formal split. He claimed it was merely a matter of logistics, as there were too many people to share a single kitchen comfortably. He insisted he had indeed provided justice, pointing out that the sister-in-law had already offered her apology. Qin Lang asked why, if sharing a kitchen was so inconvenient, his family was the only one forced to live apart. He questioned why the eldest brother's family wasn't the one sent out, since his own family had already been pushed aside. Qin Lang asked if it wouldn't be better to simply split the family for good, especially regarding the so-called justice his father claimed to uphold. He pointed out that forcing his sister-in-law to give a painless, hollow apology to his daughter was hardly a fair resolution. He then posed a sharp question. If he were to beat her now and apologize afterward, would the matter be considered settled then? If that was the rule, he was fine with it, though he noted that, having done manual labor for years, he didn't quite know his own strength. He warned them that if he failed to show restraint in his strikes, they would just have to bear with it, which, naturally, was a terrifying prospect. Panicked, the sister-in-law, Chun, shrieked, asking what he thought he was doing as she scrambled backward. She reminded him that she was his eldest sister-in-law, and as the saying goes, the eldest brother's wife is like a mother. She shouted that hitting her would be an act of filial impiety, clinging to her status as a mother figure to shield herself. Qin Lang countered coldly, noting that since his birth mother was still very much alive, Chen seemed quite eager to replace her. He remarked that one might think she was actually cursing the matriarch by trying to take her place so soon. The old mother snapped at Chun, asking if she was planning to rebel while she was still drawing breath. Chun quickly pivoted, begging the mother not to listen to Qin Lang's nonsense, her voice dripping with sudden desperation. She claimed she meant no such thing, mentioning that when her son, Wanger, became a high official, she would be a grand lady. She argued she would never dare to rebel, but insisted that Qin Lang's demands were simply going too far. She wailed about how he could possibly strike her, prompting the mother to tell Qin Lang that his sister-in-law was still family. The mother urged him to speak calmly and refrain from using his fists, hoping to de-escalate the tension in the room. She told him to state his requirements, promising that as long as they weren't too excessive, she would agree to them. Qin Lang agreed to listen to his mother, but he had conditions. First, the sister-in-law had to slap herself twice. Only then would the assault on little area be settled. Second, they wouldn't split the family, but his household would live entirely independently. They would no longer share a single pot, ensuring everyone's peace of mind, though he told his parents not to worry about their own care. He assured them that even if they lived separately, he would still fulfill his filial duties and provide for his parents without missing a single cent. Thirdly, he demanded that his sister-in-law and parents stop bossing around his daughters and treating them like servants. He warned that if he found them bullying his family in private again, he wouldn't settle the matter as peacefully as he was today. The mother was puzzled. Previously, Chen had complained that living separately would be a disadvantage for her. She wondered why he was suddenly the one proposing it, and what kind of trick the boy might be playing. To be honest, she was right to be suspicious. Finally, she agreed, telling him that for today, they would do everything according to his wishes. However, she insisted on one condition, that when her grandson Wanger became successful in the future, Qin Lang's family wouldn't be allowed to come crawling back to share in the wealth. He wasn't allowed to regret this choice later. He looked at them as if they were fools. After all, who would actually want to depend on people like that? Later, we see him instructing old Five to head to the back gate, noting that in these wealthy households, the front door wasn't meant for commoners. He told him to find the purchasing servant at the rear, slip him some silver, and mention they were from Qinshan village. They had come with the contract and the necessary funds to redeem Chunya and bring her home. The servant insisted on 15 taels of silver, not a single penny less, maintaining a strictly business-like tone. He also added another 500 won to the bill, claiming the manor had provided the girl with 2 sets of winter clothes. After the payment was settled, the servant finally went to the back courtyard to call Chunya out. When she appeared, the girl cried out for her father, her voice trembling with a mix of shock and relief. Seeing her so thin that her bones were showing, he pulled her close, whispering that he had finally come to take her home. He held her tight, calling her name as the weight of their separation finally began to lift. Sometime later, we find them at a stall where the vendor cheerfully serves up a hot bowl of stewed meat. As spring arrived, Qin Lang's business began to see a massive explosion in popularity, and this, as it turned out, was only the beginning. He decided to take over a shop in town that came with its own spacious backyard. As things progressed, Diya's frostbite finally began to heal completely. Meanwhile, Qin Xiao had transformed into a truly capable assistant at the shop. But then, we see Wu Niu being hauled off to the local prison. His relatives sneered, muttering that no matter how much money he made, he was still just a lowly merchant. They told themselves that once their precious Wanger passed the exams and became an official, they would make Qin III kneel before them and beg for mercy. Yes, that was the plan. They pinned all their hopes on Wanger, believing he was their ticket to greatness. And so, they waited anxiously for the day the exam results would finally be posted. In their minds, that day would be the moment the Qin family brought glory to their ancestors. Suddenly, an official appeared and asked who among them were the family members of Qin Wang. The father stepped forward eagerly, announcing that he was indeed Qin Wang's father. He asked with a wide smile if this meant his son had finally become a scholar. He assumed they had come to deliver good news. To be honest, he couldn't have been more wrong. The official replied that it was more like a funeral notice, as Qin Wang had been caught cheating with hidden notes. He had even attempted to offer a massive bribe to another student to take the exam for him. The examiner had seized him on the spot, leaving the family stammering that it was simply impossible. They insisted their Wanger was a brilliant student and would never dream of cheating. However, with witnesses and physical evidence secured, the county magistrate had already issued a final decree. Qin Wang was stripped of his titles, sentenced to 50 strokes, and exiled to the northwest border for hard labor. The decree ordered their entire estate to be seized to repay the bribes, and the family home was to be raided immediately. Every single item of value was to be taken away, leaving them with absolutely nothing. Panic soon reached the shop as someone cried out that something terrible had happened back at the old family house. The news was devastating. Qin Wang had been caught cheating and was already being exiled to the distant border. The government had seized the house, the eldest sister-in-law had lost her mind, and the second brother sat at the village entrance, laughing vacantly. As for the father, he was so consumed by rage and shock that he ended up paralyzed in his bed. Qin III listened to the chaos, simply replying that he understood. He remained remarkably calm. The messenger stood there in disbelief, stunned by such a cold and detached reaction. Inside the shop, the work continued as they hurried to finish their tasks, ignoring the drama of the old house. And so, life at the new shop moved forward, leaving the past behind where it belonged. Later that day, the children told their father that mother wanted to close the shop early so the whole family could be together. They planned to head down to the riverbank to watch the floating lanterns. A perfect end to the day, really.